Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm running a bit late today. That's what happens when you get pulled into a blue sky conversation or thread with Dan Abramoff. You got to read like all 7 responses. And to be fair, I wrote like 6 or 7 responses myself. And before I know it, it's stream time. Yeah, we're starting a bit early today because I actually just came back from morning school drop off, and my daughter has a half day. So going to keep things a little bit on the shorter side today. Got a lot to do. Going to be, if you guys caught it, I'm moving. Yeah. Out of San Jose. I moved here back in summer of 2020. Yeah, it is. Hey, thanks. Good morning to everyone. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, as I was saying, I got hired by eBay March 2020. And one of the things at that time was they wanted me to relocate to work. I never actually ended up working out of the office at all, pretty much. I think I went to the office like on my last day to like pick up a Marco shirt. But generally speaking, I did not. Let me, sorry. How are we doing? My mic doesn't sound correct. Is it a little bit quiet? Is this a little better? Maybe my mic was a little quiet. Anyway, yeah, I moving to Portland, Oregon, a little bit closer to the temperament I'm used to. Although I think the whole West Coast has been kind of on fire. Or sorry, that's probably really inappropriate, but I meant like the temperature's been a lot hotter here the last few years. I felt like when even back home in Vancouver, Canada, where I'm from, it's been really I don't know. For you Americans out there, like we basically never got over 32 or more 30 35 Celsius, or I guess you'd say about 85 Fahrenheit. And I think there's like going out to the valley in Vancouver, there's like getting into the 40s in Celsius, or basically over like over 100, like 100 and 102, 104, whatever. So, which is crazy considering how far north it is. Anyways, you guys probably don't care about Canadian weather, but all right. We should probably get started here because we don't have a lot of time. See if I can get Twitch pulled up too, so I can give some love over to the Twitch folk. I have quite a few things I want to talk about today. But what was I going to say? I didn't actually prepare pretty much anything in the way of notes because as I said, I've been busy. Yeah, I am still here. I am still in the office. It's the last stream from this office. Although I can keep this background going forever, if we want to. But yeah, let me see here. Maybe I'll just put it on screen for a moment so we can like lay out the things I wanted to talk about, and maybe you guys can help me out here a bit too. Let me move this over here. Let me share my screen. Sorry. A little disorganized this morning. Present, share screen, entire screen, that one. Okay, yeah, what do we want to talk about on the stream today? React last framework, I think, want to talk about. I want to at least very briefly talk about push-based reactivity. We're going to have Milo on the stream to talk about that when I get back. I want to talk about Remix. I think I want to talk about Dan Abramoff's recent RSC articles a bit, because he did something where he talked both about server functions. Another one we talked about Astro, and I think both are worth talking about. Server functions. Oh yeah, I want to talk about uh, short form videos that I've been doing. Short form videos. Could also talk about. No, I think that most of the Solid 2.0 stuff is going to come up here. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Anybody else has anything you think I should talk about? I mean, yeah, I mean they're not shorts, but they're like normal videos, you know. I think people were only getting on Theo when his videos were over 30 minutes, and it's funny because it's a very difficult balance. Yeah, but we should talk about that. Svelte async. Let me think here. We talked about it on the previous stream like 3 weeks ago. I don't know if there's been new developments there. There probably has. I mean, it's an RFC that's very open, and people have been talking about it. Yeah, forking Preact. Yeah, we'll talk about Remix. Yeah, I've got it here. I've got it. The funniest thing is, I wish I had actually posted my thing when I first saw the leaked GitHub. I was like, they're gonna fork Preact. I knew that like even before. We'll talk about it when we get to it. It was actually kind of funny. I wish I just called shotted it at the time when that like Adam Rackets originally posted that thing. Angular v20, yeah, yeah. We could talk a little bit about Angular. Because I don't know too much about V20 specifically. I actually went to Google I/O though, so Angular V20, Google I/O. We can talk a little bit about that. Okay, talk about Solid Base. Yeah, is there new stuff going on with Solid Base? Maybe I should talk about the yeah. There's actually a couple things related to Angular to talk about, because they also the mascot too. Okay. What else did I do? I went to the Veet meetup in San Francisco and saw the preview of the Veet documentary, which was pretty cool. But I don't know if there's much to talk about there. Yeah, most people thought that. It's funny. I'm not going to take my private discords out, but me and Tanner Lindsley were having a conversation, and he was like very much on they're going to use Preact, and I was like, yeah, I think they're going to fork it, or like use Snapdom, like the underlying thing. My gut is that yeah, we'll get into it in a minute. We'll actually look at this. Yeah, okay. I think this is good enough. I can make this last a decent amount of time. But yeah, let's start talking about maybe the short videos, or maybe I should say shorter videos. Shorter videos. Yeah, let's talk about the shorter videos. This is actually from the templating video. Honestly, they've been having pretty good success. I knew that they would, but uh, um, like why is it's like when I go to YouTube, I just get Theo. I love responding to the comments. Angular already has signals. Why doesn't it implement fine grained updates yet? Because it's semantically different than what they're doing. There's a reason that you get signals and then you get fine grained updates, and it takes it takes a while, like people, they have to actually change what they're doing. You don't just get signals and like it's cured, right? Anyway, but I mean, it's a fair question. I probably need to cover that in another video, which is kind of coming down to it. As you are all aware, or many of you aware, I've started recording, shorter videos. This one was 11 minutes, Introduction to JavaScript Frameworks, and this one I just released this week, which is talking about 3 ways we render the DOM, which is roughly based off an older article I released, which was the fastest way to render the DOM. I didn't get into performance, but I basically identified way back in the day in this article that there were essentially 3 different approaches to rendering the DOM. Hyperscript, which is basically VDOM. I call them string templates, but this is dirty checking. And then, I mean, I guess this article actually didn't lay them out in the 3 different things. It did them by performance. But one of my earlier articles, I have to find it somewhere, where I basically realized that there was basically only 3 different approaches. Okay. Yeah, I should have started with this actually. That is a shot from Santa Teresa Park in San Jose. It's on a trail called Rocky Ridge. One of my favorite and my family's favorite hikes to go on in the area. It's not too arduous, but what's really cool is you can go up to this radio tower and then you go across this ridge. And the ridge, once you get up there, like it's not the biggest up, but once you get up there, it's a very long down through along this ridge where it's just like grass meadows on both sides. And it's like this incline kind of winding path through these little hills and all these rocks. It looks like maybe there's some kind of volcanic stuff in the past where there's like all these stacked rocks all over the place, but they've all been covered in grass or green. At least when it's the right time of year, things get pretty brown here in San Jose. So that shot's obviously the greenest time of the year in the spring when all the California poppies are out. But yeah. Yeah. This is what it came out to. Actually, what it really came out to is have you all seen the SolidJS intro video? We have a channel, right? Not Fireships one, the other one, Intro to Reactivity. Originally recorded back in a while, but we have this video, and I'll just drop it in the chat. It's also like on our homepage. And it just show, it shows basically like very quickly. It's the thing where we show what's reactivity, how does reactivity work, how like how to it's a demo like we almost always do. In fact, I do this in part in one of the videos I do, but it's only 5 minutes. It's super crunched. It shows the JSX. It basically shows every way Solid works, how it does fine grain updates. And while it's fairly technical to get all that content in here, I was very impressed with Attila's ability to structure everything so that literally you basically get what makes you Solid unique in one go. Like the problem is Solid's like DX and stuff is kind of like React. People don't really get it. And there was this comment, sort by newest first. And in that 5 minutes, it didn't spend a single second differentiating itself from React. Is this an intro video for people who don't know about SolidJS, or for video for people who already know it but need a refresher on use state? I saw this and I was like, first of all, like the problem is if we've been criticized in the past. In fact, I remember we had I think it was Selma back when she was at Netlify next, my coworker, going through our page and being like, why do you expect your users to know about Solid? Like there was a whole thing. She was reading our docs and it was know about React. There's this whole section in our docs where like talking about unidirectional flow and React's philosophy and this. And it was like, why do you like expect people to have this previous knowledge? And I noticed that whenever I compared Solid to React as our starting point, people would be like, oh, you're just bashing or attacking React. So I was like, okay, let's just show something really cool. Like, this is what Solid does, and forget that any other framework exists. But the part that really got to me here was, or it's video for people who already know about it but need a refresher on use state. And I'm like, it never occurred to me until I read that people might watch this video and be like, "Oh, isn't this how React works?" I think this has been edited a bit. The wording originally was a little harsher. It was basically like saying that like like this was just a video to show people how use state works. Sorry, that was odd. StreamYard actually crashed. Let's get back here. Yeah, there we go. That comment exemplifies the difference between reactive solid from the framework video. That people solid is for people who want to understand what's under the hood. Yeah, but I mean, people. I was hoping people could just come in with a clean slate, but it occurred to me. I was like, wow, why are like maybe this is missing. Like people who use React, when they see this video, they'll get it because they'll be like, God, like I don't mean use, but like understand React. They're like, I feel the pain of the re-renders. This video actually is a very indirect way of showing exactly how Solid is different. It shows global state to this. Like basically, if you know React, it should like well enough to understand how it updates. It should click. If you've never seen a JavaScript framework before and you're just learning, you can be like, oh, okay, what it does kind of makes sense. Where it misses, and this is a gap I didn't think about, but maybe like 80, maybe a huge amount of devs live there, like 80% of devs live there, are the people who use React and have no idea how it works. Because they'll just see and be like, oh yeah, isn't that how React works? And like for the longest time, I was thinking like, see, back in the day, people used to criticize signals for being too magical. Like, how does it update? And I'm like, I thought that what I'd done was show people that it wasn't magic. I thought that over time, the industry's matured and people, could, accept or understand that, maybe, it isn't magic. What's that old saying? Like people can't differentiate between magic and sufficiently advanced technology. Um, like I thought, we just moved on, so things were not magic anymore. But now I'm starting to think it's actually the opposite. It's more that the average developer has no clue how anything they do works, and in that case, they're not put off by magic because literally everything's magical to them, which scares me because like someone mentioned that I made some comments in my video where I'm like, oh, beginner content, and they're like, if Ryan thinks this is beginner content, and I'm like, well, maybe not beginner, like not like this is, how I show hello world on the screen. But like I don't think you should be using a tool without at least like have some mental abstraction for how it works. You don't need to like be able to build it yourself. I mean, that helps, right? Then you won't ever have to build it yourself. Um, but like at least be able to kind of be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is how it updates. It's a virtual DOM. So when I make this JSX, it returns some objects that they compare against each other, and then they update the real DOM. Like that kind of level. But reading this comment made me realize that a lot of developers don't even have that level of understanding of what they're using. They're just like, you know, I copied this code somewhere. Maybe the AI generated this code for me, and they have no clue. They're like, it looks like it works. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to separate that there's enough React devs to give them this. The funny thing is this, in my opinion, this video actually works well for um experienced React devs. It's more like we need a video for JavaScript devs and a video for like less experienced React devs. Because, and the reason is, there's that old thing where you should learn HTML and CSS and whatever. I'm actually not someone who prescribes to that. I used to teach guitar lessons. When I taught kids guitar, I would start with a song or something that was familiar to them, liked, and get them in that way. Because if you just start with like fundamentals like completely, you will lose them, right? And I do think it's fair to treat new developers like children. So like I think we're all like that. When you there's a certain characteristic when you're going in to learn, you're opening yourself up in a certain way. You have a certain vulnerability. I think it's an okay mental model to kind of approach it that way. That's why most senior devs are all like, oh, it doesn't matter what framework you use. It's all the same. You've talked to anyone who's been doing stuff for like at least 10 years. They're just like React, whatever. Right. But it's always like, I had this at eBay where like they thought because they're using Marco, we were ruining their career. Like that kind of perception. And I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of agencies and companies are like testing people on specific React knowledge as the web platform doesn't exist. But if you have the general knowledge, I would take that in a developer over specific React knowledge in almost all cases, because at that point, learning React is trivial, What's your opinion of legislative React? I think similar. I mean, it has signals, but it can't be similar to what Solid does because it's working inside React. React's adding signals to something doesn't make it work like Solid. Taking away the virtual DOM is what makes it work like Solid. Fundamental, not beginner. Fair enough. Rich Harris said it's all about vibes. Yeah, I just did a podcast yesterday where I was talking about that, and it's so funny because with the vibe coding thing, it's almost like he was just like leading the path forward. This is why I'm scared of everything moving to compilers. Yeah, this is a great point. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. And it scares me too. Like the funniest thing, people, I didn't express it as well enough in my videos, but like the reason that like Solid's unique feature isn't just the performance or the XG model. Solid has been really trying to be transparent and remove the abstraction layer. Like keep it minimal. You can't remove it. There is ergonomics. You're constantly battling with like, it's easy, right? Adding more abstractions makes things easier. Doesn't make them simpler, but easier. And it's such a hard place to be, because you're like, if you have something that's popular and you want to get new users or people over to you, it makes a lot of sense to be like, look, my version's kind of the same, but it's easier, because you're right. Performance, people not going to care, right? They're not going to be like, oh, this one's like slightly faster or whatever. And people won't appreciate the ergonomic mechanical bits as much. I think that's like super important, like to understand architecturally what's going on, but people won't get that off the bat. So the easiest way to get people coming in is going like, I made this framework, but easier. And that is basically was Vue and like selling point coming in. Like we spent the libraries that got big after React kind of acknowledged like React 1, we're going to make things easier. When I created Solid, I was coming from a different place. I was like, I don't care that it's easy. I actually kind of like React. But I think that we need to like look at the implementation. The abstraction's too far. We have this thing that's a DOM, it's retain mode, it updates incrementally, and now we're getting so far away from that. Like, don't get me wrong, I loved Knockout's like composability, and when React went to hooks, I was like, this is amazing. But what I saw was that was also the exact same moment that React compromised on what made React really good, like amazing. The Pete Hunt days were over at that point. It was a good evolution. React needed those qualities, the composition, but that's also the moment when like you could now take a old Pete Hunt video, take every place he mentions like Knockout or Angular, and just replace it with React hooks, and the video still makes sense. So like, it's okay. Things are allowed to evolve. and more abstractions make things, but that isn't actually what was making things or something things were solid for me, right? Compilers are scary as hell, because like there's always a hole, there's always a leak. We even see that before you get to compilers. Like the reason why does everyone not like use effect? Use effect is a necessary part of the framework. It is an escape hook. It is important. It does stuff. It's because that's the first moment people actually realize how React works. It's when you pull back the escape hatch and then you're like, oh, I thought I was just sitting on like a platform above a field, and you're like, no, I'm actually on like a glass, um, uh, like what do you call it? Like when you're walking on like a in a skyscraper, like a skyscraper, and when I move that panel of glass, there's actually like I'm gonna drop like a skyscraper or a mountain, like that's the moment you were sitting there all content walking along your platform, and then you move the panel use effect and you're like, wow, it's not like a couple feet, it's like 1,000 feet. um Half the devs started like 3 years ago. Would they even have the opportunity to learn how it works? Yeah, I don't know. This is why I started creating these videos, because he has a point. He thought I was being critical of him, but like I actually think he's right. I just it's hard to fit that into an intro video like specifically for Solid. I'm like, I just need to work on education. I need people to go, look, these are how frameworks are the same. These are how they're different. That's what there's only 3 ways they render. Yeah, of course, some smart guy in the comments is gonna be like, well, I have a fourth way and I have a fifth way. But like they're honestly just optimizations around the same thing. It's fine. Everyone wants to be unique. I get it. But like generally speaking, they've all kind of worked the same way for the last 15 years. Yeah, AI will make things worse. If you don't know, you only care about developer experience. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I'm still catching up with comments here. Oh, interesting, Dev. He also made legend lists, which hacks all like list reconciliation on top of React. That's cool. I mean, I'm glad people are working so hard. Like, the thing is, you're really incentivized to work within the React ecosystem. Your library will instantly be way more popular. Ah, it's tricky. Solid ecosystem has had a lot of firsts, or much earlier than the popular solutions for a lot of problems in the space. But then the same library can come out a year, 2 years, 3 years later in React and be like 100 times more popular because of React's user base, and usually get the credit on a lot of that stuff. Like if you look around on stuff on like right now about server functions and client loader, preload, server function patterns, you're going to see handstack start mentioned everywhere in literature, even though like it was the work we did in Solid Start that basically pioneered that whole approach. But again, React solution is just instantly going to jump up. I'm not saying that as any knock against the quality of Tenor stuff, because Tenor stuff is amazing. I'm just saying like even the stuff that's not so amazing is going to outperform the same version of or a better version of the library in a smaller framework, be it Svelte or Solid or whatnot. Yeah, people are still responding to my putting signals in React thing. Let me jump ahead a bit. Yeah, so React works the same way Svelte 5 was. Yeah, I agree. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with all the comments here. It looks like you all took a break for 4 minutes, so that helped me a lot. Sorry, no. Keep it coming. Let's keep talking. Yeah, it's because a lot of people, when they look at hooks, they see signals more or less. They see state propagation, and technically speaking, you can do all this stuff in React, but people don't understand that's the pattern. Like use memo is a lot like computed. On-mounted is an effect with no dependencies. You know, on change can also is the standard use effect. Like it's just like I don't know. The mental model for hooks is always a bit of a hybrid. Yes, that is true. Corbin wrote a great book where he compared Vue, Angular, and React. Um, I think one of the trickiest things about being in that zone is you have to cater to people who are doing um, like popular projects. You know what I mean? Like you will sell more books or you get more attention. And I mean, this is a problem with any kind of content things. One thing that's I'm obviously going to include Solid in all my comparisons because of my bias. But on the other hand, um, I'm not compelled necessarily to base my stuff purely on what's popular. I'll bring Quick into a comparison if I think it's relevant. So um, I do think that sometimes gives me an interesting outside angle because I literally don't care if a solution's popular. Like that's not why I'm looking at this. Um, I mean, most frameworks have a version of Shad CN at this point, right? The thing is, this is the thing I keep on hearing. The problem is you this will always get you back to React. Uh, someone I remember when Shad CN came out, and I had this conversation with Nikhil, who a Solid core member, maintainer, did a lot of the work on Solid Start, Creative Vinci, all that stuff. Did Solid 3, R3GS universal render, and he basically made this argument to me. He's like, once I use Shad CN, I never go back, to doing Solid. I'm like, how long has Shad CN been out? Like 3 months? Like you basically just like hyperbolic like on this. Of course, other frameworks got their version by the 6-month mark, but React will not always get first, but will generally get first dibs on any kind of project, which means that is when you're at that edge of things. But the funniest thing is React itself is not on the edge of things. Do you know what I mean? Like React itself is not the new thing, and people are completely accepting of that. But if like Shad CN comes out and there's no equivalent in a different framework for 6 months, well, then I just have to give up, right? So it's interesting. Winners write history. Yeah, winners do write history. I mean, that's definitely true. You see this when you look at like when you when even like the conversation around React and jQuery and stuff, people literally paint the picture like we were all just like cavemen using jQuery, and then React came and showed us declarative frameworks. No, the truth of the matter is there were declarative frameworks before React. There were even like Vue only frameworks like Knockout before React. In fact, most things you could do with before React, and React did revolutionize certain aspects, certain mentalities, best practices. But mechanically, the mechanics for a lot of stuff, like sure, there wasn't a VDOM, but there was maybe something arguably better than a VDOM. You know what I mean? Like there was other things. But now because React won, the narrative is literally like we were all cavemen and React came and showed us the way. It's like it's so funny watching it like just pave past Angular 1 or Knockout or like any number of those early frameworks, Ember, like there were people doing declarative templates. React did not invent declarative templates. It's kind of funny because when you talk to like functional programming people, sometimes like especially people like entering into the DOM, and they're just like, React is so good, other ones aren't because of blah blah blah. That's where React succeeded. It's like they miss the fact that like the DOM exists on the web, which makes it a completely different game, right? It's actually at odds with the React mentality. So it's like other solutions are actually better positioned, but I mean, try telling that to some like really functional programming oriented person. I mean, it's probably not going to go anywhere. Solid is a framework that everyone steals from, and I'm learning to embrace that. That's fine. That's another name for saying leading the way. Is like, and get rid of the shorter video thing. We're still talking about shorter videos, but it keeps on popping out. Yeah, I've been hearing this recently, which probably kind of takes us into stuff. Uh, Everyone who started front end in 27 thinks nothing existed before React. Yeah, I mean, yeah. The thing is that Reddit exists before, and people don't talk about. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's as much fashion as anything else. I mean, Rich Harris is right about like the vibes and the fashion thing, and I mean, a lot of credit to him in creating a framework that like really has like that kind of aesthetic appeal. Svelte is really quite often beautiful. I know that's kind of funny thing to describe like a tool you use, but there's something aesthetic about it that's really nice. It's really well thought out, you know. Um, it makes the name actually quite appropriate. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and OCaml guys are the best. Well, I mean, you guys know what happened. Jordan Walk, after React, went on to create his own programming language, Reason or whatever. Like, it's a certain type of person who wants to create their own language. I'm gonna say that much, right? Frameworks are kind of like it. It's like your step, but when you want to get into that level where you're designing your own language, like, yeah, I think, yeah, it says a lot. I don't know what else to say on that. Yeah, and do you ever like think it's because like fundamental differences on the platform? Part of it is maybe because we have so many new developers, a lot of ignorance. Like we just keep on coming in, and like people aren't like looking elsewhere because they're just like you go from beginner to danger, like know enough to be dangerous, and then like at a certain point you're like, okay, now I've been developing for 3 years, I'm now an expert, right? Like there might be that element of it. The other thing is I don't know how many other UI kits out there are retain mode instead of immediate. And again, maybe I'm showing my ignorance here because I haven't done a lot of mobile development. Maybe there's stuff in mobile is actually retained. It's just like my background is actually more video games. Like so everything there is immediate mode. Like I got into graphics because I wanted, video games, programmed graphics cards. You know what I mean? Like that was my area. So it's funny because I'm literally coming from the opposite and like the same end arguably that the React folks are coming from. And I looked at the DOM and I'm like, it's just the wrong abstraction for the, you know what I mean? Like it's cool what they've managed to do though. Like it's really cool that you can take something that's basically medium mode and then go like, I don't care that underneath the hood is retain mode and the performance isn't that bad. That's actually really cool. But like when you kind of go in like as an engineering problem, I want to solve this the best way. It's not where I'd end up. I think we're starting to see some more leaks, kind of coming over. I actually, it's funny again from the Camo guys. Milo's been working on a new version of Signals, very inspired by Jane Street's Incremental, which, as you guys might know, Jane Street is like the OCaml shop. It's like and it powers like Wall Street essentially, like trade estimations. Like the Wall Street, like all the pricing and all the matching and gauging is a gigantic reactive graph. That is like one of the most like biggest example of signals in reality at scale. It's done in a different language, one with the continuations, but like it's an example. Like I think part of the web's maturing is actually looking outward into like other types of solutions and understanding how we get there. So like in a sense, maybe React bringing some functional programming stuff is, a good thing. It is. But it's weird when we're in a place where, like, because the lack of the like sources and how this all plays together, people like just assume that, okay, that's how things work as a de facto, and we're back to that magic. Like, how does these things work? It's a fun weekend. Create language, understand how elections of VMs work, but publishing for general use is completely different. Yeah. I mean, I had a course at college that was like this. Spent a term on it, and I love that course. It was really interesting. Creating we had almost like our teacher gave us like this kind of assembly language, like a very basic constructing assembly language that they'd written, and they basically throughout that term of the course, we basically created our own programming language on top of it. Yeah, anyway. Interesting. Yeah. Wall Street is actually learning. Okay, yeah. I meant like it's the trade. It's not like, I guess, Wall Street stuff. Jane Street's used for the price, like investment price estimation. I mean the actual like stock market stuff itself. But that's interesting. I was not aware of this part. Cool. That's cool, Sean. Anyway, getting back to it, all of this stuff is what led me to make a couple of silly videos. They're not silly, but like just like, do you know how frameworks render? Do you know SolidJS? Who is this guy? Course creator of SolidJS rendering. Yeah, that's me. What? Um, I made a couple videos. The response to them have been very good. Some people are like, oh, you should do this all the time. I think you have to understand that the stream, you can cover different types of content. People, the audience that wants these videos, I can actually agree, they don't actually want videos generally that are over 30 minutes. That's why they're being critical of Theo. I think Theo's content that's over 30 minutes is better content, but there's some tension transferring that into videos. Unless people are signing up for like a course, like Front End Masters, longer thing. I think there are definitely courses like Theo's like 2-hour like Next.js course is amazing. I think that like a lot of people, even in this, it's still just like consumption level. This is why I call it beginner. It's not really beginner, but it's like I get a little bit on my palate. I'm like virtual DOM, and then I move on, which is fine. At least that's all I can hope for. I don't expect people to retain everything in the video. I just be like, oh, okay, these things are different things. These things are similar. Just get the kind of idea of what's going on. I'm glad people respond to it. I can think of lots of other topics like this we can address. But as I said, very specific type of content. Everything I talked about in these videos are things that I could have made a video for 5 years ago. Someone else could have made a video. It's my unique knowledge might be coming out a bit because a lot of people aren't as familiar with different frameworks. But generally speaking, we get a lot more out of the stream, right? Like this is like content that honestly would be better served. In fact, if we had better creators, people like Jack Harrington who are out there. But I mean, to be fair, Jack's audience is wider, and he already does really technical videos. This maybe like it just isn't a necessary zone, but for me personally, I needed this zone because you're right. It came up because of that tweet. I might as well pull it up on screen so people can see what I'm talking about. After seeing that video, I was like, one of the bigger challenges I had promoting SolidJS is assuming developers had a general idea how the tools work. If I show off fine-grained learning and met with, isn't that how React works? I'd find myself educating them more about their existing tools. This is a lot of effort and leads people to take more adversarial stances when everything is head-to-head comparison. But in the absence of that, you risk people not getting it. Those who know. Sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's a lot easier to sell on superficial things. Flashy demos are unique capabilities, but those capabilities rarely stay unique for long. And a more popular solution's promise of getting there one day, often, again, because of the lack of understanding, is what that entails. Like, God, we had to deal with the React compiler being like, oh yeah, Solid doesn't matter. React compiler is coming for like 5 years. And it's like, yeah, they announced in 2020 and now it's 2025 when it's like roughly out. That whole 5-year period, React kept people in tow with like this promise of this technology. But if you understood how the virtual DOM works, you know that it could never solve the same problem. Like it doesn't actually it doesn't address performance in the same way. It solves an important problem. It lets it basically raises the floor of React. It means that like your slowest programs will not be as slow anymore. It makes your average React program perhaps a bit faster, but it doesn't raise the ceiling. It doesn't increase the capability or performance of that. But if you don't at least basically understand what React works, you think the compiler will solve all, and you'll spend the next 5 years saying, "Oh, I could try a new framework, but the compiler's coming." You know, it was like all those guys who were like, "Oh yeah, I won't need to learn anything but React because AI is going to take over." Oh wait, those are the guys in Remix, and what are they doing? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Like, I think that it's always valuable to know how your tools work to a certain degree. I know there's been a lot of tension on the React side where people want more details. I'm not saying you need to understand how the work code by code, but hiding the abstraction, pretending like it doesn't exist, is not beneficial. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, you can see this in between back end and front end. A lot of time I feel like the back end community has no freaking clue what goes on in front end. They still like view us like how it was when they were forced to put some JavaScript on a page in 2006, and then they like see React and they're just like, this is craziness. Understandably, from that perspective, I get it. But like, yeah, I think even in the web we have insular subcultures. So yeah, I don't think. I mean, I know that what they're saying is that outside the web, but yeah, I think everywhere is like that. Oh, okay, okay, that's what the thing was. I think these videos are great for solid people. I mean, maybe that works. It's like take the most condensed version of what we do in the stream and get it out to people, right? Because this is the base knowledge a lot of times. Some people do come in the stream, they're like, Ryan, I have no clue what you're talking about. And even when you stop to answer questions, and I feel worried about answering questions, sometimes I will skip it. But if you notice, I will quite often jump into answering those questions. And I know my explanations aren't always the best either. It is challenging for me. It's one of those things where you've been working on something for such a long time, you forget like how it was to be there at the beginning. I think there was like I remember someone was talking about like this was like a teaching thing that I learned when I was getting into management on software, and they're saying like pretend there's 5 different levels of expertise, and sometimes pairing different levels makes a lot of sense. Like someone who's at level 4 will get a lot from a level 5, but a level 1 will not get much from a level 5. So you're better to almost pair 4 and 5s together, and like 1 and 3s. Like you want to make sure like basically there's a whole structure to how you could put people together so that each side gets the most out of it. Because sometimes at a certain point in your learning, actually teaching people actually improves your understanding of the subject. So like there's a whole theory behind it, and I don't have it off the top of my head to pull it out, but I do think I am not the best person for this most of the time. But you know, when there's a need, there's a way. Yeah, it's so valuable in thought process. Yeah. Yeah, I try to. I also move really fast and I forget to. Yeah, this is a comment about reading the comments out loud. Um, I'll see what I can do. We're gonna get into some more visual stuff in a minute too. Non-developing learning by developing. Well, because I spent I watched SolidJS video and thought this is the first framework that actually makes sense to my brain. Well, it's because I spent the time to make it make sense to your brain. I think a lot of the times we don't spend the time to make sense. And the craziest thing for me is that the React mental model is so prevalent in front end, and people don't understand what's going on. They don't even understand how oddly different it is. Like I don't know, maybe things have changed from when I was like in university or whatever, but um, functional programming was not the push, and maybe it's because I was in engineering and not in comp sci. But like everyone learned how object oriented programming works, and I'm not saying object oriented programming is great or whatever, but generally speaking, like the way React works is not the most obvious way. Of course, if you talk to React developers and people have been doing it for a while, they look at you and go like like wouldn't it just like the whole component rerunning and then hooks magically being there? Like it's not. There is quite a bit going on in that abstraction. It's not as simple as like I have a callback and it gets called. Like this is an event. If you explain people signals in terms of an event system, even though it's not accurate because it's actually a directed graph, blah blah blah. But like if you go like, look, you run a function, set up some events, and then when something updates, you call the event handlers. The model actually makes sense. Like there it is. Even early React with classes made sense. You're like, look, you create a class, it has some lifecycle functions. When it updates, you call render. Like that makes sense. So I just feel like when we got away from that, we're just like at some point, I don't know if it's ego, whatever. We got to a point where like our abstractions are so good we don't need to explain them anymore. I don't know. Well, thank you. Background engineer, I confirm that I have no idea what your front people are doing. It's been a blast learning Solid. Thanks. The funniest thing is the best part about signals, because you're saying it has some trouble understanding reactive things. For simple apps, Solid is great. But the thing is, for large apps, reactivity keeps things isolated. This is actually where you get the biggest benefit. It's funny because when we look at micro benchmarks, we're all like, you're right, React is good enough. It's fairly fast, you look at micro benchmarks and you're like, okay, this one's like 100 hits faster, who cares? But the benefit of signals is because of like you have separate data graphs. You're never going to get to the point. So the problem is it's kind of inevitable in something like React that you will trigger things that need to re-render that will need to re-render. And then you get into this like, oh, why is this re-rendering 16 times down? It's just because the way things get combined together. To have those guarantees built into the system is what scales. It's why do you think the Angular guys like jumped all over it? They're all about large enterprise apps and stuff. They're just like, geez, we're using RxJS and yeah, they have an async thing to concern with versus like say something like Redux, but like which is synchronous and actually gives us ability to have a little bit more predictability. But like generally speaking, I think people are missing out. Like I built Solid because of this isolation modularity. I was working at a company and we had one app that I worked on for years and years and years in. It wasn't a small app. It wasn't the largest app of all time. But when you get to those larger apps, quite often they get broken apart more. It was about as big of an app as you could expect to support with one team, And even then, like there's areas that people like weren't experienced with because like, it was, it had specialties and whatnot. And the reason that I was so hooked into the signals thing and I designed this is because of how swappable I could make pieces, how modular it is, because the clear contract between like the reactivity and how isolated those updates can be made. Anyway. Right? The only performance issues that small apps have is code size. And for a small React app, like this client app, like who cares? So like it's a weird issue. Can you have something like Astro and you're like, look, I can make this page in 5 kilobytes and have all the JS I need and get great page scores. And then you're like, I'm going to get Next.js and it's going to be 120 kilobytes. That is a performance issue. It's a different kind. But like basically, I'm using RSCs so I can reduce JavaScript, but it's actually the price of getting in is larger. So like, I actually disagree with this whole thing. I think actually the performance is actually can be relevant on size on the small size stuff, and on the large size, signals are actually benefits. So yeah, I mean, I'm the creator of SolidJS, so of course I disagree. But yeah, I'm definitely going to call this out when I see it. Yeah, the demo from back in the day is still referenced because people saying virtual talk. Well, I explained that in my video. My latest video, I did actually explain why people think the DOM is slow. They're right, but that doesn't mean not every firm. Like we all use the funniest thing about that time period when people are like, oh, the DOM is slow. Everybody knew that. Even Angular the people are condemning. No one actually read from the DOM after the first couple of years. Like, we all learned that lesson. The virtual DOM was not unique in solving that issue. If you actually go back to some of the earliest talks, Jordan Walk knew that. He actually said something along the lines of like, we came up with this method. We thought it would be really slow. And then we compared it to Angular. And you know what? It wasn't. It was actually pretty good. And then when you consider the benefit of being able to just rip it, re-render everything, blow it away, like, this is really compelling because we basically have no performance overhead and we get this cleaner mental model. That's how he sold it. He didn't say it was fast. He just said that it was as fast as Angular. It wasn't actually until Ryan Florence later showed the hype video showing it like conquer Angular and Ember that people got this idea that, oh, the virtual DOM is fast. No, the virtual DOM has never been fast. Like it's fast at a different problem. Like, if I set up a situation very specific that works to React, like the dbmon thing that Ryan Florence said, yeah, okay, it's fast, but come on, like, it's like, if you understand how it works, it can't be. And the funniest thing is, people did not even see that back in 2015. That's why I started those benchmarks of Solid and started Solid, because I was just like, it's kind of obvious, right, guys? Like, why am I being told that the virtual DOM is faster than the DOM? Like, I'm sorry, it's moronic. I mean, it's not nuanced at all. Okay. Yeah, I mean, chicken and egg problem. Marketing will help, but the thing is, people don't invest in something unless they think like the thing. It's all like a shell game, and I'm not good at shell games. Yes, I'm very thankful to Tanstack for opening Solid up to professional use. It's very cool. Yeah, it was because it wasn't virtual DOM versus DOM. It was virtual DOM versus inner HTML swapped. Right, which is like Backbone. That's what I was getting at. Like, React is better than Backbone. Again, I'm very happy I covered the content in my latest video, because that is exactly what I was trying to show off. The truth is, other frameworks were already doing better stuff than the inner HTML swaps. So it's like, React got a lot of credit it didn't deserve. On the other hand, there's a lot of things in React did that people underappreciate. But on the other hand, anyways, let's keep on moving. What's next topic on the list? I'm going to keep on making short videos, but I want people to understand there's a balance to it. I am appreciative to all the comments and stuff. It incentivized me enough that I should keep making content of this type. It seems to at least get people excited about understanding how their tools work. I'm glad those people exist. I know they exist because I said, Jack audience, for example, is a great audience for this kind of stuff. Oh yeah, the other frameworks had horrible component models. That is true. Yes, that was basically the thing. The closest we had to components before React was BBVM or MVVM, model view, and that still kept the view model as a separate tree from the view. I think we all understood, like, even React understood the model goes on the outside, but basically you had 3 separate trees, and React was like, no, we only need kind of like 2 trees, and we don't really care what you do with that model tree. To be fair, Knockout didn't care what you did with that model tree either, but like, I think that is the biggest change, and it is very, very, very important, because that also is what led to the whole unidirectional flow thing and all that. Like, don't get me wrong, React had a lot of really good stuff. It's just they got overcredited for technology side, and even they acknowledge it. So they're like, React is not the VDOM. VDOM is just an implementation detail. To be fair, to keep React's philosophy, it's almost a necessary implementation detail, but it is, the VDOM is what's overrated, not the philosophy and the architecture of React. Honestly, what's missing Solid? You can literally do a video. Yeah, I mean, I'm, as much as I like that argument, I think it's a bit of a cop out. Like, you could say that about a lot of libraries. People always overestimate the effort of wrapping something in React. There is some effort there because React re-renders, which is not how the DOM works. But like, it's kind of true of anything. So it doesn't say much. It's like, I do think that we have a lot of the key libraries, so it doesn't matter. But I think I think this is just an excuse. It's not a real thing. Like, this is a sliding scale. This is just what people say when they want to say, oh, like it's like when you politely come up with a reason like not to go to a party or something. You're like, oh, I have this. Like, I get that. I don't dwell into it. I'm not trying to make people feel bad for what not wanting to try the tool or whatever. But like hiring and education, which are key things, are where that next frontier. It's not about libraries anymore. It's not about like, oh, I don't have these libraries in Solid. That's not the thing. People write that. Be polite. Let them continue to say that. It makes them feel better. But like, yeah, I mean that's the thing. You don't want people to feel bad about it because sometimes people can't make the change, and when you're like, and if you kind of dig into it, they're going to get resentful. Like if they chose to say that thing, even though it's like clearly not true, you got to like at least be like, okay, they know that at some level, so you just got to kind of let them, you know, say it. Maybe in 6 months they'll come back around. Maybe they'll be in a better place, and they'll appreciate more for that than you picking out at them. At least that's for me on the framework side. You guys can do whatever the hell you want, honestly, because you guys are out there and you didn't write the framework. So Backbone, I'm pretty sure Backbone views were literally like swapping like re-renders. They have model updates, but once you got into anything structural, you basically needed to recreate the template. Anyway, what was my next topic on the list? Yeah, well, I got this pulled up. Let me see if I got. Let's talk some Angular and some other events. This was fun, by the way. I was at Vite meetup and saw a bit of, as I said, the documentary coming out. I always love this shirt, but last trip into San Francisco before moving, so definitely cool to see Evan and Theo there, as well as a number of other people I haven't seen in a while, Matt Billman and whatnot. So, but no, what I wanted to look at here is, do I have bookmarks? Yeah, let's go bookmarks. Yeah, here we go. Let's talk Angular for a second. Aren't these guys cute? This one's like the Angular logo, and then they have some anglefish variations. But yes, it's so funny. I don't know if mascots are going to make a comeback. This makes you think of like Ember, back in the day. Solid Store is is like 2 kilobytes. I'm just gonna say right off the bat, there's no bundle size considered, because if you look at Solid and Solid Store and all that stuff all together, it's less than 7 kilobytes with transitions and stuff. Size is not a thing from it directly, at least. Yeah, that's funny. I don't know if Theo's React. Theo's in an interesting zone. I think he's like the best representation of where React is, but the React core team is maybe somewhere else in terms of. But yeah, I do like that it's 3 frameworks sitting beside each other. Yeah. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The Ember hamster. Yeah, and they dressed him up all different ways, right? Like, it's been a while since Java, like, but this was more common. Like, I think Batman JS, like, it was common back in the 2010s to have like mascots for these libraries or frameworks. So like, yeah. Anyway, it's cute. Someone once, I've shared the link so you guys can like see. They actually have like other angles of these things in here, like showing like 360. They are designed in 3D. I did make a joke, I admit. Let's see if I got solid here. Yeah, I made a joke because someone in our Discord was calling out that where is it, profile, that solid logo looked like a duck, and they're like, they made this image, so solid mascot. But yeah. Uh, some responses to this were actually a little bit nicer, solid. Anyway, it's good times. The first solid logo was actually a snake, and I was like trying to play off snakes, like the deceptively simple, JavaScript framework. And people are like, oh, it's like Solid Snake from Metal Gear, and I mean, if that called on it, but we decided that snakes have a lot of negative connotations, but in some cultures, so like it wasn't a good fit. So now we are. I don't want to say it because the second you see the duck, you can never unsee it again. But yeah, I guess now we're a duck. Oh yeah, Dino has a mascot too. The little, is it the whale? Yeah, Dino. Oh, the dinosaur. Yes, the dinosaur. Of course. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, maybe mascots are on the way back. So anyway, I guess it's worth pointing out. I'm going to bookmark this. We should talk about this. Sorry, I just saw that comment. I'm like, what? Where am I going? Sorry, I wanted to look at. We are talking about Angular. Yeah, Angular 20. To be fair, a lot of that's maybe if I just go to literally their thing, I'll see the release announcement. Developer event. Yeah, here we go. Okay. A lot of I was at Google I/O and watched the presentation there, and a lot of the stuff has been coming out the last few versions. It's not specific to Angular 20. Yeah, that's true. Someone did make a solid one. I did end up seeing that. So yeah, and Astro does have Houston. So yeah, no, that's fair. Mascots are back, I guess. But anyway, Angular 20. I think the most interesting thing about Angular 20 is that Angular's been doing this thing where they've like been doing a lot of experimental stuff, almost like React's Canary things, except they make new versions. It's not like you're on 19 version blah 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 forever. Like they generally their experiments are contained to a version or two or three, let's say, but like there's clear step ups. It's not like kind of like as Wild Westy. And yeah, so like stabilizing effect linked list. Basically, all the stuff that they signal stuff they created in Angular 16 is now like stamped as stable and good to go, which is huge. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not so much about new features. There are new features, but again, experimental, still testing out. They have a resource API where params and loader. It's very similar to Solid Split Resource API or TanStack query like design, where they have these params that you track and then you do the fetch in here. It makes a lot of sense. And then they're actually taking it further because it's Angular, so they're coming up with specific types of resources like HTTP resources, things that shortcut. So you don't like this might be at the base, but like if you have an HTTP resource, you don't have to write the loader. They just know it's fetch, so you can just pass in the a function wrapping the URL that you want to go to and handle the params that way. So yeah, is an example of this here. HTTP resource. See, yeah, there he goes. It's streamlined because this is basically the params with all kind of combined in a certain way. So like, but yeah, this is the other big news, zoneless. I talked about this in my video, but Angular has always worked on the system where they literally intercept every single timer, async event, DOM event, whatever, and then basically after it runs, goes, oh, well, this ran. Something could have changed. Let's go check everything. That's what Angular's classic zone detection is. It's kind of like async context where they can kind of pick it up anywhere. But the thing is, because Angular doesn't use set state, like they never had like or signals originally, like had any kind of mechanism. They're like very proud of their plain JavaScript. They were basically one step above polling, right? Like if you think we build a basic JavaScript framework and you update some plain object, how do you know when to re-render? Well, you don't. Well, the first thing you might go is like, oh, every 60 milliseconds, so 60 frames per second, I'm going to just check everything. Well, that would be very expensive and wasteful, but you could just set it on an interval. Angular is like, okay, we can do a little bit better than that. Whenever an event happens that we could care about, we can check everything, right? React took it, like it's slightly different thing saying like, oh, when you set state in a component, the owner of that state and everything below it can now recheck. And then signals are kind of like even further where they're like, when this thing changes, the things that listen to it change, right? There's kind of these three stages. There, Angular is kind of moving from zoneless, or sorry, from zone to zoneless, which is basically a system which uses signals to trigger component re-render. So you can think of it a bit like using legend state in React. It's Angular doesn't use a VDOM, but they are getting to a point now where their incremental dirty check, like incremental DOM inside, is basically a dirty checking mechanism. It's a single pass, diff in the holes. Now you can trigger that via signals. So it's a big step forward, right? It's not quite all the way to fine grain rendering, but it is well on the way. Like this is that journey they're going on. And in V20 now, like you can get there. Angular is still, going through its renaissance, so to speak. Yeah. So anyways, I know there's a bunch of other small things. I'm not as familiar with Angular to kind of talk about them too much. But in general, those are the two big things that stood out for me. So there's just so much stuff in Angular, like style guide, improved host bindings. Honestly, it looks like there's a lot of stuff there. Oh, experimental support for VTest. That's cool. They're moving to modern tooling too. That's something to keep track of. I think this is like part of that whole thing. Anyways, and see, because Angular material, like this is the kind of thing about that. We have like material UI in Solid and Suid, and there's another there's two libraries I think that do material wraps. But like in Angular, when they do an Angular release, they talk about it. Like for them, it's all part of the framework. It's a very different mentality. But yeah, deprecation of NG4 if, because they have the new control flow. It's gonna, I guess it's interesting. I wonder like how Vue people feel about this kind of stuff, because Vue data binding was kind of based on Angulars, and then now they're the last ones with like V4, VIF, and all that kind of stuff. I always thought the attribute stuff was passable, but also kind of a little bit awkward because of the semantic change of what attributes are. But again, that's where JavaScript's framework started. It's interesting that now when you like look at the templating of all the different frameworks, it's actually distinctly Vue that has it when it started as an Angular thing. Anyways, and the mascot discussion. Okay, I think that's good for Angular. Started your career on NGF. Yeah, I think a lot of people did. Vue is the true Angular to you. That's fair. Although, as I said, it's very interesting. All the frameworks that have adopted signals are on the streamlined path to become kind of like Solid now. So it's interesting. It's really just the that template layer that differentiates us now, which I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting thing. I kind of like JSX, but that's just me. Okay, let's keep on going. So we talked about Angular. We talked about Google I/O. We talked about that. Okay, let's continue moving along. Okay, yeah, let's pull this out right now. Give me a second. I just want to change how I'm sharing my screen. 2 secs. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Let me see if I can. A second. Let's add percent. Share screen. Chrome tab. This one, share. I watched this live. Well, when Theo recorded this video, he took a long time to put this one out, way longer than I expected, because this one, it's called React, is the last framework, and the thumbnail is something along the lines of like React 1, basically. And I don't know why he delayed it, because I thought this was like a pretty hot topic at the time. And it's a topic that's, I feel like might have even had more potency at the time that he delivered it. Maybe he wanted time to pass so that it like there was more discussion or more debate on it. But the premise of this video, generally speaking, is that because of AI and training models and stuff, that React becomes like the de facto choice. And I want to talk a little bit about the implications of it, because when I watched the stream, it annoyed me. And if you, when we get to later in this, you'll actually see me in the chat be sounding fairly angry. For me, I don't usually sound angry, but I actually was like quite annoyed after this video. I actually wrote HackMD that I've teased on stream, but I never showed it in its completion, which was along the lines of what was it? It was like, actually maybe I can a second. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I know I'm on a different tab. You guys can't see it. Apparently I need to send myself a GitHub code so I can get into HackMD. Second. But in any case, it was basically, I went on a rant about how I was dissatisfied with modern React. And it was the same time Mark Erickson was writing his post about how he was kind of dissatisfied with modern React, which he never ended up publishing. But it for me, it actually stemmed from this video and the whole Vite controversy happening at exactly the same time. Okay. Sorry, 1 second, just putting a code in off screen. Okay. Where was I? Sorry, I'm just trying to see if I can find where my falling out with React is what I called it. Anyway, I just want to talk about this about a little bit. Well, it's because it's a Create React app controversy. Basically, they didn't want to endorse Vite as their official tool. They wanted people to use frameworks. And because there was like awkwardness, they didn't have an official stance, and they didn't completely deprecate Create React app. Theo himself had suggested that they change it to Vite, and that kind of kicked off this whole thing. And then even like 2 years later, they still hadn't moved. And Create React app was actually broken. Like you literally installed it and it was broken. And people like Mark, who care a lot about, this kind of like baseline beginner kind of like flow thing, was just like, he's like, this is just ridiculous. Why can't you just like get rid of this thing? And it took a long time, and finally they like released something saying they officially deprecated it, and that like, here are your options. And they mentioned Vite in the most backhanded way, like, oh, if you like really have a specific need and like things are terrible and like you're a really brave person, and like it sounded like they were just like, you can maybe use Vite. Like it was the most thing. And yeah, I mean, they edited the tone, they edited it, and they updated it over time. But it was like they were like, look, we said you could use Vite. I'm like, yeah, but like it was really, that was kind of the thing. It's an interesting conversation to revisit when we talk about Remix in a minute here, because like when you consider like the impact of forcing people towards meta frameworks, So yeah. This is an outdated look. We now rolling docs to packages, which you can use to check out Vibe rules package. Yeah. And this is why maybe he was just sat on this because he wasn't sure he would be too ahead. And then by the time he actually released it, things have moved on. Because like I only want to get focused on a couple pieces here. Like let's.
I need you guys to hear me out on this one. More.
You guys can hear the audio, right? Like we hear
more than usual. I know the title just seems fake, right? Like there have been so many frameworks since React. How is it the last one? This is a complex topic, and it's a thing I've been thinking.
Like you should watch the video. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but generally speaking, let's see. What are these most?
Before I forget, super generous free.
Oh no, he's talking about his advertisement. Yeah, he makes this comparison to cars. Let's listen to the visit.
There's a certain width that a street or lane is expected to be. If you make a car that is narrower than is needed for that street, you don't get much benefit, because if the street is this wide and most cars are like that, obviously they're longer. But if this is your car and this is the street lines, making a car like this isn't super beneficial. Making a car like this makes no sense at all. There's a whole bunch of optimizations that you could theoretically make that would meaningfully improve parts of how a car operates that literally do not matter, because the streets are how they are. And even if all modern cars were suddenly manufactured in a way where they were 30% narrower with no negative, the streets aren't going to change, because there are too many cars out already that people already own that are expecting streets to be a certain size. You cannot change the way that cars operate on a fundamental level.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I this is a sound argument, but you have to like understand that React didn't build the streets. The web platform built the streets. So I don't know. Yes and no. As I said, I don't need to get too much into the details of this video. I think what's happened a lot since this time period is that, well, React has always struggled with other frameworks. That's something that's starting to change a lot, as Jack was mentioning, in terms of like basically being able to teach your tool with these other things. Like, things have to improve at a certain point, because like the biggest challenge with this argument that Theo put out there, because if you believe this, it means that old React beats new React. Like, maybe this is a good justification. You're like, RSCs aren't taking over because the models are trained on old React, not on RSCs. Like, maybe that's your explanation, but it feels like a way of basically saying like, this is why new technology fails. And don't get me wrong, this does make it harder. Every step that you put in the way of innovation makes things harder. But does that mean innovation doesn't happen? I don't know. As I said, you have to watch the whole video. I'm going to copy this in here. That's not what I'm doing here today. I just wanted to talk about it mostly because people mentioning here that they've been having good success with AI models. I mean, I get questions all the time, like, how do you get good AI models in Cursor? And I think that someone mentioned here in the chat, which is kind of funny. Cursor's written in Solid, by the way. It's funny that like an AI startup, like a company that does it, and everyone's like, oh, I can't touch this other framework because the AI models aren't as good. Yet the AI company uses Solid to build it, or like something that arguably doesn't have as good models. It's an interesting conflict, because at a certain point you do care about quality. You do care, and because people care, people will make things better. We won't stay stuck in just because models are kind of not as good historically doesn't mean we stay that way. I think Theo himself had some tweet where he said something along the lines of like, if you're betting on like something where the models aren't getting better, you're going to lose. I think taking this stance is kind of one of those losing positions. We need a new platform. I mean, maybe that too, but let's I want to go a little bit further here. Yeah. So yeah, here we go. Does he say this part out loud? Yeah. Let's hear what he says.
Volume of AI training data that is already in existence that these models have been trained on means that even the React team can't improve React now. Adding new features to React will make things harder for React.
Yeah. Yeah. I get what he's saying, but I mean, he says himself that he hopes that he's wrong here. And I think maybe this is why he held on the video for a while. I'm trying to see here. Yeah, he's talking about the stack and where things can be improved under the hood. But I mean, the problem is like, what do you do if I talk a lot about abstractions and saying how they make things easier by adding layer on layer and layer and layer and layer. But at a certain point, you have to go, okay, with what we know now that's better, you can remove the layers. That's the only way to actually simplify. You can't at a certain point, the abstraction gets so high that even if things are easier, things complicated, there's holes. As earlier Chris was mentioning being scared of compilers. The reason is because every abstraction is not perfect. So at a certain point, you layer enough abstractions, the holes start manifesting this spaghetti monster. And you end up with these layers and layers and layers. The only way to actually cure the problem is take new knowledge, updated mental model, shift to there, and realize that certain pieces aren't aligned the way they are, and remove them and build new, more base pieces that fit with them. But in order to do that, the boundaries do shift. The road widths do change. Like there's very little room for optimizing within the pile that's already there. This is a very broad strokes look at this. I think there's a lot of like micro steps in between these, but generally speaking, you have to, if you actually want to simplify, you have to move the goalposts. So you can continuously tell how much smoother it is. Yeah, it makes sense to me. The funniest thing is, you know, stupid AI hasn't decided anything for us. I kid you not. Maybe it's the same people who don't watch my videos. There is a lot of devs, and they will come and tell me this. Maybe this is the latest excuse. You know, no ecosystem. Oh, no AI. Like maybe they just need that thing to tell you. But like, this is a common thing where people are like, use AI as a reason not to try new things. I mean, maybe that's the gist of it. People just will try and come up with any reason not to try new things. Yeah, if anything, AI will be able to switch into life easier. That's the X factor. Yes, you know, migration. It's like, I mean, the opposite argument of the side of the argument is if we get better language, and even if there's a convergence on language, like we've seen with hooks and signals to a certain degree, over time you have to imagine that the more efficient output is going to win. Because if you're the person at the prompt, at a certain point, you're not going to care whether it chose to use Solid or React. You're just going to care that you make something better for your user at a certain point. Maybe that's not today, but at a certain point, you're going to matter at that. And if the language is designed well enough that they understand it, then you're going to hopefully pick the thing that's smaller, faster, that's better, you know, empirically, measurably. Yeah, I mean, sorry, side note, sync engines, I think it's a very interesting problem. A lot of the work I've been doing in 2.0 has actually been thinking about how the coolest thing about sync engines is it returns front-end problems to being a front-end problem. And like, there's a lot of complication with things like RSCs and server rendering SSR. And the thing is, some aspects of the React solution are actually quite compelling there, because when you leave the DOM, when you leave retain mode, then there are advantages to considering other approaches. When you have a network in between, do you diff? Do you, like, it's harder to get fine-grained communication or whatnot. But sync engines are like, yeah, we're fine-grained through. It basically is like the best argument I've ever had for Solid in the whole history of things. It's like, if you're using sync engine and then like feeding into React, you're doing it wrong. Like I don't even have to wince at making that argument. Anyways, yes, yeah. Dev has been doing great work in this area and talking about sync engines and WebSockets. They're different technologies in a sense, but there's a offline first and persistent backends have a lot in common in terms of how the client interacts with them. So it's a lot of the same problem space. I mean, I guess it depends on them. I don't know if you guys search up Convex and SolidJS, and you're going to find a video of like the creator of Convex creating solid bindings and doing stuff with Solid like 2 years ago. Like we met at a conference in the SF. I was giving a talk on Solid. He was giving a talk on Convex, and he was sold. And in fact, his team had to talk him back off the ledge and be like, look, React's more popular. We need to focus on the React integrations and get this thing out first. He knew what was up. I think his name is Jamie. Just look it up. You'll find the video. Super, super excited about Solid. And those last are from get-go. Well, that's the things. You'll find a lot of the sync engine companies, Zero, a lot of them. The Solid was almost one of the first things they did other than React, just because it's so good in that area. Anyways, let's continue on with this thing.
Meaningful ways
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Talks about the Python migration. Being good doesn't matter anymore. Let's see.
Years for Python 2 to not be the default anymore after Python 3 came out. Python has so much staying power, despite being shit, that they can't even upgrade Python correctly.
Yeah, and we have this thing with jQuery, and don't get me wrong, React is not going anywhere, but sometimes, and React isn't even shit, so to speak. But at a certain point, people will move forward when there's reason enough to. His argument is Python 2 to 3 will never happen again. I don't see how it can't. At a certain point, things have to get better. It's like it just means the harder we're ingrained, the harder we fall. Like there's the size of these scales or waves get larger. It doesn't mean they don't happen. That's like it's like the people who never thought interest rates would go back up again. Like this is not. This is just science. Yeah, never is, and absolutes are always very hard to go with. Yeah, Intel to ARM. It's just you're always going to hit this inflection point. As I said, these are very good arguments of why you should continue using React to the end of time, but the cracks will appear. I mean, technology has its run. Sometimes it ends not because of technology, just because of fashion, but these are things. Anyways, let's move forward a bit. Yeah, so he caught me here. Let me get to this part of the chat.
Improve, because it doesn't affect the code that we write directly. While I agree with Ryan's sentiment here that people will only eat so much shit, I think good enough is a real place that we have gotten to. And while React could be improved in so many ways, many of which the React team themselves will even admit, if it's not a 10x win, no one's going to bite. And I don't think anything offers a 10x win. In fact, my conversations with you, Ryan, have helped push me over here, where it almost feels like the closer that React gets to right, the more frustrated you are with it. Where when React was 70% correct, 30% wrong, it's like, yeah, they suck. They're making a bunch of mistakes. We can go make something better. When I got closer to 90% right and 10% wrong, that 10% wrong gets so much more frustrating when you see how close they are to doing things right. But at the same time, it's so close to right that nobody cares anymore. And even if they did care, if the AI will write the part that is tedious and annoying, and the compiler will compile out the parts that are buggy and slow, how much of that 10% even affects the average React dev anymore?
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. And I was in chat and I couldn't respond. And I was like, yeah, because the comment kind of got me too, because it wasn't he's right. He's seen me get more frustrated over a couple of years. I'm actually less frustrated the last year than I have been once the compiler came out than the years before. And it wasn't because React was getting closer to what I considered right. He needs to chill, otherwise we'd still using jQuery. My frustration was the realization that React was never going to get it right. Not that they were getting closer, but that there was no hope. It's weird. That's why I was talking about my falling out with React. I actually like React for a long time, right? What did I say here? I just reading from this, I'm not going to show the whole article. The other day while responding to chat on a stream, Theo noted I'd become increasingly frustrated with React. He attributed that to me feeling by closing the gap, it's good enough, was finally nearing a point where it's increasingly difficult to operate outside of it. He's right that I've grown more annoyed, perhaps even hostile times, but it's for different reasons. While it coincided with React making efforts to address technical concerns I've had, it isn't because I feel the gap is closed. It's quite the opposite. I acknowledge I may have never understood React for what it was and projected my own biases on it. I'm an author of a framework, but I don't even recognize it anymore. That is it, right? And maybe I'll just read some of the stuff out loud, right? But for me, it came to key points. Loss of identity. The first moment I got put off by React was when Andrew Clark announced that Next 13 was the real React 18 release. For me, this was when React jumped the shark. It was not long before we started talking about what it meant to build fully with React. how meta frameworks were blessed path forward. Astro, for instance, wasn't a fully React and was delegated to the side notes in the docs. The suggestion that Vite started with suitable replacement for Create React was pretty much dismissed right out. Why does this matter? React is built on principles of modularity and transparency. It won our hearts with setting out to have opinions on a specific slice of the problem and left the rest to us. People laugh when I say it was conceptually lightweight. Or say this, but it was conceptually lightweight. While its best practices and philosophies can fill a book, mechanically it had fewer concepts than most solutions. It's just JavaScript approach, reduced magic, and pushed fundamentals. Functional programming idioms helped us make sense of the system, and its model is clear without tapping into the debugger. One can argue for years it's been pushing up against the constraints it set for itself. Not controlling state is hard when you want to manage loading states, async, and ultimately the network boundary. React hooks brought thoughtful state management and composition to the library. But as things have progressed, we've seen friction with the library authors wrestling with interfacing their own change management system with React's. Sorry, I'll go full screen here. Updated async model, like concurrent mode. There's nothing wrong with React's newer model, but it started cutting back from what was originally left to user space. Still, this didn't bother me much because tools are allowed to evolve. So are these meta frameworks just the next evolution? There's a subtle difference. Using a feature is optional. You start with something and you introduce as needed. You don't start basic and introduce Next.js. That's the first choice you make. React no longer stands alone. I remember when React was a library for building user interfaces. How would you describe React in one sentence now? So yeah, loss of identity, loss of direction. React was instrumental in the proliferation of single-page apps. It wasn't the first single-page app library, but it grew to be the most used. And it didn't stop with the web. React Native showed JavaScript and mobile developers alike how UI could be built differently. You even see its influence in things like Swift UI. So if React is so good at building apps, why is suddenly all the focus on the server and more specifically server components? Well, several reasons. The web has always had the split between apps and sites. There are a lot more sites out there. Single-page apps with SSR aren't optimized for page load, and RSCs can theoretically improve this. Offloading to the server has benefits not only for sites, so why not strive for a universal model? If we're only adding stuff and not taking stuff away, what's the harm? This could all be fine if these features you opt into, but what if the decision you have to make is with a new project? RSCs, isomorphic SSR, can live side by side, but in the second you add RSCs, it's a completely different architecture. There are consequences. And that's assuming you're in a position to SSR at all. RSCs are not the best architecture for apps where the primary contents change frequently because mutation model lacks granularity in the client. They are a stark departure from the client-side architecture focused building apps that React got to where it is today. And worse, there's no clear path from A to B. Maybe there shouldn't be, but I have no idea how the average developer could possibly figure out what direction they should be taking. Finally, loss of inspiration. Believe it or not, I'd be okay with above if I could be excited about the impact that different architectures can make in their respective sweet spots. This could just be chalked up to needing better training. But what if it's missing the mark? You've heard of jack of all trades, master none. React is a general tool, at least for now, and so that seems reasonable. But what if it doesn't meaningfully impact the problem areas? What if RCs don't improve load times compared to other approaches? Or if the React compiler doesn't make your apps fast enough? The most popular solution is given a lot of leeway to make future improvements. Alternatives have to prove their worth. The popular solution can only say one day. And don't worry, RSCs will fix that. The compiler means we won't have to worry about that. But what happens if it becomes clear that that day is never coming? Do you pretend not to care? Do you act like you never cared at all? What happens when optimism becomes complacency? What happens when we start to celebrate stagnation? The final icing on the cake is that AI conversation. With so much more training data, how do we ever escape our past? This cements React as the eternal winner. It also means React today trumps React tomorrow. Don't worry, the compiler will fix that. Will it really? Do you actually believe that? Or is that just what you want to hear? I go on to say some more personal stuff at the end, but I think you guys get the point. No, I was just reading something that I've written that I hadn't published. So I'm not making a live video right now. I just wanted to put that there. Yeah, no, it won't. Probably not. Or if it did, it wouldn't do so in a way that's meaningful. React has its model, and it's a model that makes sense for it. The problem is the more it compromises, the farther it gets from where it should be. I'm glad that the team is at least kind of holding the ground in certain places. It's just like it's hard. When you get to a certain popularity, you need to expand to the next thing. And the truth of the matter is, this is kind of like when indie artists, I've had the punk rock where I'm basically saying they sold out in a certain degree, but maybe they didn't. It's interesting. You talk to the core team members; they actually do care about a lot of these things, but it's hard. I think any software project's doomed to get this way. I'm not condemning React for getting here. I just think that people need to wake up. Like this happens to everyone. It will happen to Solid one day. All right. I think that's all I wanted to say on Theo's video and conversation, to be fair. Yeah, let's stop sharing that. I just, you know what I mean? Like, it just, we're in this weird place. Sorry, there is some stuff in the conclusion I actually want to say. Well, let me see. It's made it increasingly difficult to love React the way it did in the past, as React is buried somewhere deep beneath compilers and meta framers. In its current state, it no longer feels like it was made for me, as new features become increasingly less accessible. And the worst, understanding where we've come, it's hard to be excited about the future. At this point, clever innovation seems like a solution to problems it created for itself. It's hard to care about problems that may have never needed to exist in the first place. Okay, yeah, anyway. I don't need to talk more about React here, but I think the whole last framework thing is. I think we know that's not going to be the case. I think that's. I did need to address it, but I think we kind of conceptually know things have to move on over time. It might take a long time. Being stuck with React for a long time is not a bad thing. React is good. I just think people have to at least, understand that, like, things have to progress. And maybe this is me more getting out on the AI topic than React itself. It's just to see this kind of mentality out there annoys me to no end. And it's because of innovation. It's not because, I'm worried that React is just getting too close to perfect. Anyway, next topic. Yeah, that's the thing. People want this. We don't like see Act 3 horse that would solid wrapper. I mean, you don't make React better by adding solid to it. You don't make a virtual DOM better by adding signals to it. Like if I was going to do that, I'd do something like Preact. It's super small, lightweight, add signals, but like that's just not the direction. Like it doesn't make things better. Anyway, let's keep on going. Was it perfect? The wrong version of perfect. Well, I mean, maybe that's another take of it. I think that like React is. I don't know. I feel like it has drifted from its original thing a bit, so I can't agree with that. I do like that there is some purity still there. React does have its principles. They won't just. I said it was about selling out, but for them, it's more of juggling really hard extremes. I don't think they actually would ever sell out in the same way. I think certain other frameworks might just sell out because they wouldn't care. They're just like, yeah, I'd sell out maybe potentially, like mentally, but I don't like. I'm not sorry. I didn't mean me personally. I'm just thinking like, no, most frameworks are actually pretty locked in their principles, which is why they still exist. See, if they weren't, they probably wouldn't exist. Because otherwise, like, what are they fighting for? If you're willing to become whatever to fit, the need, become a chameleon, then you actually provide no value in this space. There's someone who's going to push the boundaries of a specific approach more than you are. I mean, it's hard to say. I've always said Vue is like a tiny bit on that side of things. So like maybe there's benefits, to everyone liking you. Svelte maybe has elements of that too. Yeah. But even them, I wouldn't say would completely sell out just to be popular. Sounds like Vue. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, that's saying that Angular's. So, yeah, I mean, things have to change and evolve. I actually, I think it's because different frameworks care about different things. So certain types of changes are okay within the scope of what they care about. You know what I mean? So like, if you don't care about the mechanical stuff, then you can change the mechanical stuff. You only care about the syntax of your templates. You know, like there's no actual. As long as you don't step back from that, you're actually perfectly fine. I mean, it's an interesting tension when Svelte runes are more like require a little bit more syntax. There's no problem with that, obviously. But is that a departure for Svelte? When React, who's just JavaScript, uses a compiler, is that a departure for React? Okay. Okay, let's see what's next topic. I want to talk really briefly about Solid 2.0, where we're going on here, because I've actually made a lot of progress. On the last stream, you all saw that I was like theorizing like how we could do different kind of SSR techniques for the future. And then after that stream, I actually posted something on Twitter. Let me switch over to this view. Small prototypes suggest that run one non-nullable nested async parallelism should be possible for our upcoming SSR solution. And I don't think most people understood this example that I was doing, because like I put library code and component code. But what I was trying to show here is that I have a where's our app? Component A. Okay, so I have and our other one is component with 3 different names. So what I was trying to show is the parallel one is I just showed a component that each fetch their own async and then renders it in a div. And then here I show one where component A contains component B. This SSR stuff is not syntax. This is what the JSX compiles to, okay? Just ignore this. But component A fetches data, and inside it, there's a component B that also fetches data. Inside it is one of these initial components that also fetches data. So you have component fetching data, down a tree. And the point of this demo was that I was trying to show that if I went here and clicked refresh, and I think the delay on all these is like a second or something. They're all like 1,000. What you're going to see here when I refresh this is, first of all those console logs run it immediately. But what you'll see is both examples end up rendering spitting out their render call in 1 second. So whether there's 3 in parallel or 3 stacking, there's no waterfalls. They literally all take the 1 second that it took the data fetching to take. So I was basically showing that I've shown this in a previous stream that we could do this on the client. I was showing how we could do this on the server. And I actually honestly took this prototype, went straight to DOM expressions, and I actually implemented in Solid. So I actually have pull run once stuff working in the 2.0 branch right now. There's some exceptions, but I have suspense working, streaming, all that stuff. I actually got hydration working again for everything but error boundaries and lazy. So like I kind of implemented what, I take on SSR. There's more details I need to get into in transactions, but I actually made really good progress after the last stream. And this example was just kind of showing how that worked, right? And mechanically, what the trick is, I mean, I don't know if anyone cares too much. I think I talked about this in the stream. I just implemented what I talked about in the last stream, which is that I basically collected the promises and then pulled the data through on async. So it's basically a completely pull-based system. What I mean by that is most reactivity is this push-pull thing where you set a signal and you fire off a bunch of events, but the events don't actually run the callbacks. The events just kind of say, hey, these things change and these things might possibly change, because you have a graph. And if the graph gets short-circuited, let me scala draw it for a second. Scala draw. If the graph gets short-circuited, let me scroll out. I'm like, I probably have like examples of this somewhere because I like show. Yeah. But what I was trying to say is like if you have a graph, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You have a chain like this. If this changes, but then you realize that this doesn't change, you don't need to run this. So, but because of complicated graph shapes like diamonds or flags where like things circle in on each other, it can get complicated because like you might not realize, like you might follow this down here and not realize this has changed because it hasn't propagated there. So signal systems are actually kind of complicated in that they push notify, queue stuff at the bottom generally, then pull back. But when you pull, you actually have to walk back up until you find something, you know, that has changed, and then push back down again. So it's actually push pull push, is kind of the mechanism here. But we only need that because stuff changes. And it occurred to me that when you're server rendering, the only thing that changes is async, which means that you don't have to notify, you just have to pull, essentially. So you can just sit there as long as you collect stuff on that first render. And as soon as you detect something's async, you just collect that promise. And then when all the promises you collected are done, you just go, hey, rerun this and try and pull those values down. It's a little bit different because you know that nothing else in the graph can change, and we throw or block on async. So I was able to develop this basically pure pull-based system for server rendering. Okay, sorry, not what you guys want to see. Heading for meeting and dinner, catch the replay. It's so sad because it's what I was looking forward to the most. So yeah, I'm getting here. How long will 2.0 take to release, right? So pretty stoked on that. I made good progress. I was a little depressed last time because I was trying to skip changing how our SSR worked because I wanted to save time and get 2.0 faster. And then I realized and I explained this in my last stream, because of the way that our stuff is lazy and like it's difficult. I can't just put like component wrappers in to like set context. I actually have to use the graph, which is better long run for things like presumability. We'll be able to serialize the graph. I talked all about that in my last stream. Well, in the meanwhile, while I've been working on this and getting this working, saying I'm in a pretty good place, Milo comes to me and he's like, Ryan, I've been looking at Jane Street incremental, and I know projections are really important. And for those of you guys who don't know projections, it's a way of forking the graph. It's a way of doing something like stores and spreading the data out, so you can have like singular sources and then actually independent updates spread through the tree. It's very powerful. I did a whole article on it. It's very novel in the JavaScript space. I don't think anyone has anything like it. What do I call it? Async scheduling derivation, mutable derivations and thing. I went as far in this article, and I've been talking about this on and off for ages, of making this graph where I'm like, there's actually like a 4-tier graph where we have immutable, and then you have source versus derived, and then mutable. And I basically said that we needed something to fill the gap. There's signals, stores, memos, and projections. This is the missing piece, like the missing link of reactivity. This is very, I had a whole conversation with like people were like suggesting we cheated at the JS framework benchmark. And I'm like, no, just you guys haven't gone to a point where you actually have designed the primitives that actually handle this, and we have. So like, very important piece. And Milo was like, I came up with a very clever solve that I talked about on the async or the mutable stream about a month and a half ago. And Milo, it was sitting with him, and he's a purist. He could definitely work on the React team. And he was like, it just bugged him some parts of the implementation. And he's like, yeah, could we make it better? Could we make it first class? Could we make this thing? And he was looking at all the reactive models, and he's like, Ryan, I got a crazy idea. And I said, I'm going to have on the stream to talk about this in more detail. But he was like, what if we didn't do lazy? He's like, I know when you're doing 2.0, the only thing that actually stayed lazy was like the memos. Every other part of the system ended up being scheduled and eager again. Even the async, everything. It has to be. That's how you solve the diamond problem. Basically, almost nothing was lazy in the system, except for like just like the basic like create memo or create computed call, if you call it in your framework. We literally scheduled everything pretty much. We're almost back. And he's like, what if Solid 1.0 was right? Maybe not flush sync, maybe batch, maybe we were closer to the right answer all along. Well, obviously I like to hear that. But I've been working on this premise for years, right? I started talking about trying lazy as early as 2021 and did the working group in 2022. I feel like that those conversations even kind of led people when they found their own signal solutions, like Preact, one of the earlier ones, because Quick and like Angular and everyone to follow the suit. And I've been basically saying like this is the piece that was missing from Solid, and they went down that path. But I only got to really explore that path recently and realized like there were actual benefits to the way we do things today. So he's like, what if push works? And I'm like, well, we were trying to solve some kind of problems. And he was like, I think I can make projections actually work first class and performantly if I do this approach. And I'm like, okay, so like kind of like what we were doing before, kind of like a push oriented push pull. And he's like, no, just push. And he's like, I got an idea. I started testing it and he started benchmarking it. And it was faster than alien signals in many tests, not all the tests, but he actually created a faster reactive system. I'm like, what? Everyone's been going off about alien signals. He actually got a lot of the performance optimizations from alien signals, but where he won was the size of the graph. Like he's not push, pull, push. It's just push. And you're like, well, why haven't we been using push the whole time, right? Like, how do you solve the freaking like the diamond problem and the flag problem and all these problems if you just push? And he has solutions for that. And he looked at Jane Street and incremental. And the way they actually solve the problem is that they have continuations built into languages. And if you don't know what those are, it's kind of like promises, essentially. So they can stop like, it's funny, in Solid, we throw promises for async. They can basically stop the interaction anywhere because all their stuff is like promise then. Now, obviously the ergonomics of that is not great, and we never go that way. And we're not gonna use generators or all that. His first model he built was with generators. But then he was like, we can always fall back to push, pull, push if we have to. And he kind of solved it. He'll come on stream and we'll talk about the detail. But if you guys want to like really high level understand what I'm talking about, the idea is actually relatively simple. If you have a graph, and you have some dependencies, and dependencies of dependencies, you just, I'm making the diamond here just for fun, but let's put a couple more circles in here too. Why not? Yeah, let's put some more circles in here. Why not? All you do is start from your signal at 0, and then you count depth 1. And because of the dependency link up that you can do this, right? And all you have to do is make sure that your depth is always at least 1 bigger than the other one. And if you're able to construct a graph like this, as long as you execute by number, everything will run in the right order without using push pull. Now, and the sorting isn't even that complicated. You could use like a heap. Anyways, the problem is dependencies are dynamic. Those things can jump around in the graph. And if you're fully just walking through like in a push type system, if you ever hit something before you should hit it, you wouldn't know that it changed because you were never notified. So you have to, as I said, he'll explain on the stream how he solved basically the fundamental reason why we never do push-based systems. But the end result is a system that is simpler and more performant again. Very interesting. Of course, you have to imagine this. I had to be like, quick stop and be like, whoa, okay. What does this mean for us? Do I have to put a halt on what I'm doing to actually figure out and see how this does stuff? And the truth of the matter is a little bit, but what it actually revealed is because of these constraints, it showed gaps in the current system from a pure standpoint, like things that I kind of brush out of the rug, because in a system like this, it would just be broken if things executed in a weird way. And I realized as I like looked at these problems, I'm like, oh yeah, how do you solve this? This is bad. We should stay with the pull thing. And then I'm like, yeah. And then I looked and I was like, I took those examples And I'm like, oh crap, they're actually kind of broken in my 2.0 design anyway. Like these were actually fundamental truths that having this model kind of revealed to me. Very interesting implications around projections and stores. So I've spent the last week or so after finishing up, where I was on SSR, actually re-examining the core reactivity, and which, as I said, is a place I didn't intend to get to, but is something possibly just too compelling to ignore, both because of the performance improvement, because the simplicity. Like, it's like maybe we finally found the system that's the perfect mix between Solid 1 and Solid Point 2, where people like Dax can be happy about, we can keep the 0, 0, 0 or 1, 1, 1 behavior of Solid that people have come to love, with better performance than any reactive system out there. So it's basically, it's very compelling and interesting to me. A lot of the work that we've been doing stays. It's the same thing. But you start kind of going, can you live in a world in which this client is completely push and SSR is completely pull? Right? Is there, you kind of start working through it. And as I said, the big parts, they still kind of work. Like Dev was able to port stuff into like the current signals implementation, just be like, oh, let's see how it works. He did it in like a day. So like it's not, but I'm still working on the design implications, because I realized, because we're push pull, we can't do it. But if everything's eager, then do you even need create async? Create async could just work. You could just literally pass a promise into any reactive part of the graph, and the diamond problem and flag problems will be solved, because we've already solved those problems. Like we had to make special eager stuff to work. Now, if everything's eager, like, do we get to simplify even further? These are the kind of questions and things I have to look at right now. But it's a very promising direction. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update. When I'm back, after I move and do all that stuff, and I can get Milo on, I'm sure things will progress a lot more, and we can actually talk a lot more about the details and implications of this kind of stuff. But kind of the short of it is, we're looking at a type of reactive system that has not existed to date, and it's fundamentally, basically, its worst case is alien signals, and it's just fundamentally faster. So this is a very kind of interesting progression. So chat kind of got quiet. A lot of the context for this is actually, if you've watched my last two streams, well, I mean, that's where a lot of this influence came from. This was Jane Street incrementals written in OCaml, and that's kind of where I think JavaScript's an interesting place, because we can kind of ape certain functional programming things, but we also don't have certain primitives. We don't have things like algebraic effects, and there's stuff like a lot of the kind of functional patterns aren't built so much into the language. I don't get me wrong. I'm only interested in that stuff as far as I can use it. I have way better understanding of that stuff as I've been exploring these spaces more. So I am looking outside of the web for solutions, or we are looking outside the web. Milo's been a big influence there, because he's he's in university and he's very academic. But the funniest thing is, he said he doesn't always find the actual stuff at university. Surprisingly, he was hoping the research would be there, but he hasn't actually found that. But he, as I said, a lot of smart, I don't want to call him a kid. I think he's almost done now, but a lot of smart kids out there doing smart stuff. And it is very interesting to me. No, it doesn't, the solution, that's what I'm saying, the higher abstractions actually basically stay the same. This is mostly an underlying propagation thing, because async already had to be eager. So all those demos I showed, when we ported it over, they just worked. So it's not going to impact. The only place it's going to impact is should a create memo. There's still a way to even introduce laziness into the system if you really want to, but should create memo have the current behavior or the new behavior we proposed in terms of the async stuff, the non-nullability, all that stuff stays the same. All the stuff I've been demoing. The only question was do the API shift, because we don't need as many primitives. My conclusion so far, just so you guys know, is that I don't think so, because the server is pull based, we do have to, and there's like serialization considerations. We do actually have to keep create asyncs separate. It's beneficial because it like on the server it's pull, so we need to suggest that hey, this is actually eager, and like chain the promises and stuff. So I actually don't think this is going to have an API impact, but it's something I had to review in the process of going through here. I actually think from the outside, other than like a couple behavior things that actually more align with 1.0 than 2.0, it's basically the same. This is just a more it's a simplified implementation. It's one where it feels more like 1.0. You just push stuff onto the queue and you just run the queue. There's less of this like push pull push kind of jumping around in most cases. What's interesting about his approach is it's really smart. It actually heals. Basically, if it hits something it can't handle, it falls back into push pull push. But then once it's run once and stuff isn't changing anymore, it's actually optimized. It's kind of like the JavaScript compiler where you start at a place that you think's optimal, and then you realize something and you do a slight de-optimization. But the thing is, once you're there, you're then optimized again moving forward. So it's not like it keeps on de-optimizing over time. It actually like just heals itself. There's a lot of really smart graph theory stuff going into this, and I'm very excited to talk about it as things progress. I mean, you can today. Obviously, we haven't, like the core team hasn't made a offering ourselves because it's like, do you know how many people work on React Native? Like an insane amount of people at Facebook to build that. And they've been doing it for years. The React Native team at Facebook's larger than the React team at Facebook, or Meta, sorry. So for like, because we have universal renderers, because you can easily port Solid to any platform that runs JavaScript, stuff like Tori, native script, and whatnot just work. I know some people say React Native is better. I don't know the details on that. I had both creators and both those projects, or I guess representatives of both projects, come on here. We did very cool stuff. We built some AR stuff. We built some mobile stuff. We built some desktop stuff. It was definitely cool, and I think it's definitely viable. Obviously, stuff's not as polished as Expo and whatnot, but like we also don't have like a dedicated team of 40 developers working on it. Yeah, links is another one. I don't know. I don't think we've had anyone make a port for links for Solid yet, but like given how we've instantly gone into all those other ones, I'm not surprised. One of the cool things about the way I designed Solid was it works really well in universal renders. Svelte is with Svelte 5 here. Somebody from the core team came in and said they were looking at Solid Render doing it for Svelte. It's made it easier for Svelte 5. Like classically, Svelte actually had a harder time because they needed to like almost make a custom compiler if they did 3GL or whatnot, just because the DOM kind of tie-ins. But with the signals fine-grained approach that Solid's pioneered and now has been adopted with Svelte 5, I think it's going to be a lot easier for them to actually do these sort of things. But this has not been a problem from us, just from a design standpoint. So based on a React 18 compatible fork. Yeah, I mean, make Solid more popular. I know it's just one of the things. It's chicken egg. Just keep on getting people to use it. Keep putting it out there. Make things better. I don't think there's a magic thing here. You have to people just have to be educated. They have to understand that, realistically, you're going to use React. It's popular, whatnot, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right solution for you. Like we need to get it to a world where people like start acknowledging that other solutions are possible, and when the opportunities come, that they actually take it. When they actually go, okay, I want to make an improvement here, have them understand what real improvement looks like. And that's really what I've been trying to do with this education. I want people to, when they go, okay, I'm leaving React, pick Solid because they understand what something better looks like. Don't pick something that's, say, just like React but smaller. So anyway, let's yeah, exactly. We have people out there in the ecosystem, DX teams, people speaking at conferences, people doing stuff. It just you have to snowball. It takes more people. We did hackathons, get more library maintainers, but this is just like there's no fast path to this. Yes, what I'm talking about is firewalls. Yeah, one thing that Milo did do mention, and we'll talk more about, is he thought that projections using stores was too specific, so he wanted a more one of the cool things about going back to push base is create computed in Solid. If you know what that is, this kind of like reactive write is possible in safe environments. It can exist. And he's been working on it, seeing if projections don't need to be stored. So it's like a more general mechanism for doing derived synchronization that's safe to do. But yeah, this is all related. Did you check SolidJS with Turbo Repo? I don't know. I use Turbo. I haven't used Turbo Repo. No, I use Turbo Pack to build the Solid thing, but most of my stuff I use PMPM workspaces, so I don't know if I've tried Turbo Repo. I suppose someone has. Oh, nice. Lynx has a Solid demo. That's awesome. I'd love to hear that. Okay. Anyways, that's kind of like the 2.0 update right now. Sorry, I would like stuff that kind of go faster and streamline. I do try and find places to cut. It's really hard when you're working on stuff that is so impactful and so cutting edge. Sometimes you have breakthroughs, and sometimes it makes sense to continue along those paths. And we're actually Solid 2.0's like almost got into that complete prototype stage where I was like saying like this is when we move from experimental to alpha or whatever. Like we're at that point where I've proven out each piece. But this is also probably the last time that I would entertain something like Milo's thing. So I think it's now is the time that we vet and decide if this is worth doing, because when we get to the next steps, we're going to be streamlining for release. And this one's impactful because it arguably keeps Solid closer to 1.0 design if this works. So it actually will make migration like on timing stuff like slightly easier. Like even if we did choose to go all the way lazy again, or not again, like for the first time in like Solid 3.0, this is actually a more directed path. So I think like we have to explore this thing. Even if this is wrong, we have to explore it. It is what it is. Okay. What else do I have on my list that we talked about? Push based. Okay. Remix, I think, is the last thing. The next thing, not the last thing. I have Dan Abramoff. So we either talk about Dan's articles. No, I'm going to push Remix off. Let's do Dan's articles first. This probably won't take as long. Let's go to Blue Sky. The reason I don't use Blue Sky for a lot of like my streams and stuff is because there's no bookmark feature, right? Which is literally my favorite feature of it's basically, yeah, I mean, so it's like I have to find this. Okay, Jason Miller liked my post. I think I'm on the right path. Okay, it's funny because it's actually responding to the remix thing. This isn't what I was looking for. I think we can drop suspense of the discussion since here we're talking about broken context. Yeah, I need to go to you, Dan, and find. Okay, this is the blog post I wanted to talk about, but there's two of them. Dan, maybe they released this one a while ago. You know what? I can just go to his blog and find it. RSCs for Astro. Yeah, I didn't cover this one because the last time I streamed was May 1st, so this came out later. So, as many of you guys have all known, from the first time I said found RSCs or talked about RSCs, I basically explained to people that they're basically islands. I thought that this was the easiest way for React to explain RSCs to people. For some reason, they didn't, and they tried all these different ways initially. But I was like, and I think they didn't want to acknowledge that islands are kind of like the same thing, but they kind of are. There's differences, but the differences are because of how it plays into the overall architecture, not because of like simple mechanics. 25, and I still know what RSCs are. That's perfectly fair. Astro components and client islands, right? Components yeah. So what he's saying is there's these server components essentially, and then there's like the specific framework components. And he's showing an example of how you have two different things. You have the thing there and built there. Yeah. The client says they live in two different worlds, blah, blah, blah. Let's do RSCs. Again, same split. Server component, client component, right? Mental models are remarkably similar. Yes, no kidding. If you know Astro, you 80% mental models server components. Yeah. Even if you think they're terrible, Astro is worth learning. Yes. Okay, great. Unlike Astro components, for our regular JavaScript functions, you're not a single file component, sure. The props are coming from functions of arguments rather than Astro props with no separate template. Okay. In Astro, the separate component client items achieved writing format in Astro files. The React actually considered a .server extension at one point, but okay. Once you import a client, you're not an Astro file anymore. That you're leaving the Astro and RSCs, the same purpose achieved to use client, blah, blah, exactly. In Astro, these directed client loads treat islands or static HTML, which school does not have this distinction to user code, but doesn't really matter. We mistake for it to remove this interactivity. I think this is fair. From React's perspective, it's strict to remove interactivity. If a client does not require actually use client, this is part of the reason why they went with use client. Like, there's basically two types of components in React. There's generic stateless components and there's stateful components, which use client. Stateful components always need to be stateful, i.e. rendered or and updated in JavaScript. Stateless components can sit in either tree. That's why there's no use server in this sense, why they don't use .server, because it's the root that determines if it's server or client. And that root could be use server, to be fair. Like, you could be doing it inside a server function or whatever, but it's the component doesn't decide it. There's just stateful ones and non-stateful. Is this what he says? The last point is it's a sharp and obvious vital distinction, blah, blah, blah. The two distinct things in RC's Astro part is also just React. You could play either because they're marked down, blah, blah, blah. He's talking about how you can put them on both sides. I actually think, again, this is a very nice distinction here. That being said, because of the client load mechanism in Astro, you can still get this. What Astro's solution to this is why they have client load. While he's right that React auto detects the state, using client load gives you the ability in Astro to, or not client load, like removing the client load director, give the ability of Astro to do what he's talking about here. Because you can be like, I can take a React component and have it only on the server because it's not interactive, right? Like like React does it. You can't, like, in the same, Astro doesn't check because it doesn't know inside that this thing is interactive. But the same reason that you can just use components on both sides is why that client load directive exists. Presumably, you don't remove it on components that are interactive. You use it for the specific use case he's explaining here, like this markdown component. It's a blessing curse. It's a curse because it makes learning to wield rather unintuitive. You keep worrying about which world you're in. In practice, it doesn't matter. Because you can always reason locally. Yes, I agree. Blah, blah, blah. Move the UI into client islands. So then you have to move from Astro's JSX to React. With RSCs, you can extract the shared parts and import them on both sides. To be fair, as I mentioned, you can also extract them into a React component and use them in both sides, and just your choice of client load versus not could do it. But yes, the syntax changes. But on the flip side, because that stuff is presumably non-stateful, you're not going to have use state calls either. Do you know what I mean? Like, basically, the characteristics that make stuff really React-ish are the interactive parts, which presumably you wouldn't be moving in such a refactor. So, not a big deal. In Astro, you can nest Astro components aside client islands, but those include more client islands, so you see separate routes by your framework. Reacting, you can't pass between Astro islands. Yeah. Technically speaking, Solid can. When I made Solid Islands solution in Solid Start, I did it. I could literally go in there and add like I haven't done this yet, but like I could add 2 or 3 lines of code to the Astro wrapper and get it to share context. And I think this is what this discussion was that I was showing here. Which was like Jason Miller's like, in React, all concepts can be forwarded seamlessly between with like 3 lines of code. I was going to say the same thing with Solid, and I actually have done this, just not in Astro. That's why Jason Miller liked this comment, right? If I went in and made a PR, I can make the code so all Solid projects connected context. I did this in Solid Start Silence implementation. I just had it in Astro. Our context is independent of change mechanisms. Signals are singleton, so there's multiple versions. So there aren't multiple versions on the page anyways. Basically, this is true because Astro doesn't own the component framework, but in theory, the component framework could opt into this. Like if me as a solid author came in and said, hey, Astro, I want this feature, we could easily do this. And I think most frameworks could. I've almost produced Astro fully read. I mean, but you can do stuff like view transitions. Yeah, that's what he said. Finally, the page HTML does get replaced. Well, except for things that you choose to. You can also mark with things like, say, like, hey, I want these things to be the same. Like, so you can have components and parts of your page actually stay the same, and Astro has some smart heuristics here. We covered this on stream, but he is right that the cost of navigating will generally be more expensive. But I mean, it's an interesting trade-off, right? I actually determined that this trade-off was fine as long as you were able to do some levels of preservation, because yes, Astro doesn't diff, but it also doesn't need to support something that diffs. Do you know what I mean? Like Astro can, keep stuff and replace a bunch of HTML, which, in a sense is more expensive on that pure operation navigation. But on the other hand, it didn't need to send specific JSON format. It didn't need to serialize that format. It didn't need to have that code in the client that understood how to manage that format. So yes, this is like the creation versus update thing. So in theory, React server components are slower on creation but faster on update. That's how I would take it. The funny thing is, why you're using RSCs in the first place is the creation. So I think this point kind of defeats itself. But let's continue. This also means that unlike Astro, the server parts are refreshable in place. If you, yeah. I have to choose between a full page reg or move the logic to a client island. Yeah, so he's talking about mutations. He's basically saying that if you're updating on the page, most of the stuff is going to get re-rendered unless you kind of put it in a client island. Okay, like it's the same thing, but let's keep on going. In Astro, the fundamental output is HTML, since the front end to operate on the front. Also follows a one-time handoff model. This makes it arguably easier to learn, but limits server features to the first render and leaves most on interactive bits. I agree. Yeah, so this is when we start to get into the actual benefits. In RSCs, the fundamental output is React tree, which React understands. Again, there's a significant cost to this, but it does mean that it's better for like managing it after the handoff. And the after the handoff is actually important. And I brought this up on the Astro stream. The problem is with Astro is like client components only render on server during initial SSR in React, because when you go to the next page, if you could have context, like something specifically client being read in those client components, and the server isn't aware that you updated the counter 5 times, so when it renders it will render the wrong stuff on the server on the next page, and then when it goes to hydrate, it'll mismatch and it'll completely break. So it's very brittle. View transition API only really works if you assume state preservation is not impactful in terms of like on a page basis. Like if you have state that you're managing on every page, like you're building something kind of like an app where you have this growing thing, Astro's model actually doesn't work very well when you run it this way. You are almost pressured into making it into like a SPA embed. Like the view transitions actually cause hydration issues. React doesn't have it because they don't hydrate it after initially. I'm saying it kind of the opposite way he is. He was saying that after only does a single handoff. React actually kind of does a single handoff because you only need to hydrate the first time. Anyway. And suspense, yeah, streaming, this is important, which is why having a dedicated islands framework for your framework is beneficial. Arguably, because like if we brought that feature to Solid Start or something, it could be slightly better than the Astro version for things that are more app-like. Like there's a world where you can use presumably Astro Island type stuff in something that's a little bit more app-like, where things aren't isolated. But the thing is, most people use Astro where things are not app-like. So in that case, if you're coming in and you're like, every page is isolated anyways, I just need some widgets and the interactive parts, I have a shop page and I need the card and the whatever, like you're probably not feeling this pain. As I said, I pointed out how Astro is broken. I think I'm pretty much the only person who's cared about that the whole history that I've worked on Solid with Astro. Like people have never come to me about this issue. I actually made a fix in Solid 1.9 to actually like make it so that we don't hydrate after the fact in Astro, and that's almost caused more tension for people because like of some behaviors in there, because they just never designed their Astro pages in a way that was very app-like. But RSC is a lower level primitive, blah, 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 blah. You can use it in 2 different places. Sure, okay. Personally, I think the evaluation somewhat raw, but I was thinking when I learn anyways, an interesting idea is if you've never used Astro, give it a try. Okay. Yeah, so I think the only point of contention here is really that one about context. Astro, there's nothing stopping Astro work that way. It would be how the islands work. It's just the fact is that Astro doesn't own the framework, so they can't control how you choose to propagate it through. But it's also relatively trivial. I explained in my message with, like, if you have context as something that you can inject through your render hydrate functions, all you need to do is where Astro slots, like where you pass things back into Astro, and you can see that right in the actual adapter code. You just write to that DOM node your current context, and then when you hit the next island that's under it, you can just walk up the tree and find the nearest like slot. Like Astro has special elements for where these handoff points are, and you'll just grab that context and just go render or hydrate with that context, and ta-da, your context will flow throughout the whole tree. Dan's suggesting like that should be something you default to, and honestly, for a good Astro experience, I think that's probably fairly reasonable. But again, this is not really Astro's responsibility. You know what I mean? Like this is something that lives squarely in the framework. Okay. Astro's trying to move. I mean, they're just looking at different. I think Astro is great from like I want to be PHP standpoint. I think that's the level that they need to care about. Like when you like Astro is full stack to begin with. The thing is, you're right. They're trying to move to apps, but their app solution is embedded single page apps. It's not using view transitions to make your MPAs like an app. Whereas RSCs are like we can make apps this way. I tried to use Astro that we can make apps this way, which is why I'm probably the only person who hits this. Because I basically, when I look at Astro, I use it like RSCs. Most people don't. And I think this is like the framework author disconnect. Because like Dan was like trying to use it like RSCs, and it's like, these are the shortcomings. And he's right. I did a talk about this facing JavaScript's existential crisis at JS Nation last summer, which talks about this. But like, the thing is, if you're willing to accept that lower down level, Astro's ability to deliver on performance is compelling. Like in my test, it was the only one that got 97% on Lighthouse, which again, it's Lighthouse, who cares? But the next closest competitors were like 60%, right? And in that demo, I showed how Solid Start using, not RSCs, using server functions and loaders, etc., had the same performance as RSCs, and how Quick with resumability also had the same performance as RSCs and Solid. Basically, that we were focusing on the wrong problem. Serialization is actually the problem. Astro solves serialization. None of these other solutions don't. But the cost is, that's why Astro can't have that persistent state work, because that's where the serialization cost comes from. Whether you serialize it as JSON or as you serialize it as JSXON or whatever they want to call the custom format. So there's some fundamentals there. Okay, moving on. Which brings us to today's conversation with Dan, which had me late to the stream. How do I get to my profile here? Yeah. 1 round trip per navigation. Let's talk about this briefly. Yeah, it is funny, but I mean, Astro started. I guess they both moved at the same time. It's like, is it the same impulse that got us here? Is it because of the push for e-commerce and simple sites? Is it that Vercel wants to be the next WordPress? Like, I think there is the mechanical side thing that's appealing to JavaScript authors like myself or Dan, where we're like talking about like, look how we can solve these nature of problems by modeling it this way. I told you sometimes it takes shifting the boundaries. RSCs is definitely shifting the boundaries. But then there's like the more practical step out thing where it's like, this starts looking very appealing in 2020 when everyone's like staying at home during COVID and buying stuff. All these e-commerce things, like RSCs were in hydrogen. That was always the funniest thing when Remix came in. I was like, for a store, hydrogen is more performant than Remix. Like it's a better choice. But the I think the developer experience with RSCs was such a mess, and they tried to build their own on it, and then React team was like, no, this is actually how you do it. And they're just like, we invested so much. Like this has been the challenge with React, is because of like a big swing like this. Like Remix 2 invested a whole bunch in their approach, and React ended up bringing core slightly different versions of their stuff. It's like really frustrating when you like build your own thing and now you support your own thing, and then React's like, no, you do it this way. Like you feel undercut. Part of this is like, is React stepping out of its agreement that it made with its developers? It's like what I was talking about earlier. You know, things are allowed to evolve, but there's some question here. But yes, I think the money incentive came from the same place completely. But you know what I mean? Like Astro, Fred's coming here from Snowpack, you know, and his bundler stuff, and he's looking at a practical thing. But like ultimately, he's a company. Like Astro is a company. So what is going to interest people? I think there was a big gap in the space for like bringing modern DX to people trying to build sites. People wanted to do it. They kept on trying. And Astro's like, here's how you can do it in a way that's actually reasonable. RCs are like, here's a way you can do like with React that seems reasonable. But the challenge has actually completely been with RCs. It's actually the app-like nature of it getting in the way, because like the complexity all comes there. Astro is like, yeah, we don't care about that complexity. Even stuff like server islands are like that. Like server islands are actually less performant. There's like issues compared. It's like way more performant to actually stream or PPR, you know, than do like the server island approach. But for a basic site, you ain't going to need it, and it's way simpler, and it just works. You don't need like Vercel doing some crazy stuff. I mean, to be fair, no one needs Vercel to do that crazy stuff. You can just stream from the edge. But like our RSCs kind of pushed us down this very specific path through Next.js. And I think it was coming from that same place of companies supplying solutions for content or e-commerce. So anyways, this is the latest one I was reading today. He's talking about data loading. He's been trying to find different ways to talk about RSCs, and he's talking about HTML as an API. You know, you can just traditional round trip it. They talked about REST APIs. I think we know what those are. Like when you hit an endpoint and you pass basically JSON. I mean, REST doesn't have to be JSON. Technically speaking, HTML is REST as well, as long as you produce from the same inputs and it's discoverable. You know, some people would argue that JSON isn't necessarily REST because it's not discoverable. Like you're not like linking the next thing, but this is what the term has come to mean. But what he's trying to show here is that like this is a waterfall, right? If you need to grab all the posts to grab all the comments, and sometimes like this is actually only one. It gets more complicated when you have to grab like multiple posts and grab multiple comments, and you get the n+1 problem. But he's just showing like basically an unavoidable waterfall. Actually this one isn't actually unavoidable. Sorry, this one's actually fine. This one, he can fetch these in parallel. There are two fetches of the network, one fetch for the post, another for the fetch comments. A single page, a single link, more resources. Okay, well, I mean, if you need more resources, there's no problem with this. Having two parallel fetches, the browser can handle, you know, several like at the same time. So there's no problem with going to the server multiple times in parallel, right? There's a limit at a certain point. You don't want to do like 30, 40 parallel requests. But if we're talking on a base case here, this is not a problem. The problem is when you need the output of this to fetch this, or you need to get the comment IDs to fetch the comments. Yeah. And an efficient creeping. When we were on the server, making a bunch of requests was cheap because we could control how the code is deployed. If those REST endpoints are far away, we can move our server close to them. sorry, what's the inefficiency? In the best case, you can have a couple endpoints called it. In the worst case, you might have to hit n endpoints for n items. Or okay, yeah, yes. If there is a necessary waterfall, things are bad. This example here is perfectly fine. It's only if you start cascading. But there's actually there's nothing innately problematic here in until you actually have to use the result of this to feed into the result of this. Okay. At some point, you're going to hit a wall. Yeah. Well, yes, you're going to have to. Yeah, you're going to have to choose how you handle your data fetching. I think this is a fair thing because like this problem is as old as the web. We've been doing and solving this problem forever. Components wouldn't be so bad as tension encapsulation. Yeah. So he's now talking about like fetching inside the components. Okay. So like you can use the use effect as a simple example. And what's nice about this is you can like grab the state and use it directly, right? But this approach makes the problem for the project much more severe. Not only does rendering single page take a bunch of requests, they're now spread out in the code base. How do you audit for inefficiencies? That's a fair question. And actually, but to be fair, I think this is still parallel. Yeah. Because if I look at this, you're just fetching. Oh, no, it's not. This is why it's not. See, this is him being sneaky. This is an unnecessary waterfall because you just need the post ID. But because of if not post in here, it doesn't get down to the comment components of the fetch. So he's causing an unnecessary waterfall. This is what I call the UI waterfall. Now, how do you solve this? Well, in React, you can't. Because even if you put suspense in here, because you're going to have to use this value like right here, the component will suspend and you get a waterfall. So I get what he's saying. He's looking at it from the React point of view, and he's like, this is innately causes waterfalls and you use track stuff because someone might just accidentally return null here or whatever. What's interesting with suspense is because post is never null, you might never actually return null there because you would never do this check, right? You just have a suspense component. Now, with React, it is essentially doing this return null. But actually, with the Solid 2.0 async stuff I was showing, it doesn't. And I even showed it earlier in the stream when I was showing the SSR. This actually doesn't waterfall in Solid. So let's keep on going. So, okay. So, yeah, it makes it's not a, yeah, okay. Then so he's saying that this makes things worse. And I agree. It does make things worse in React. If his example was a necessary waterfall, I get it, but he's using unnecessary waterfalls. Those are solvable without anything. So I might edit a component, make data loading, Astro be best. Okay, sure. He's talking about queries and invalidation. Is Veterinarian essentially for backbone instant thing? Yeah, see, his perspective on client-side caching is a little bit interesting. I agree with him. His view of client caching is the same way we use query and solid router, because he's basically saying like it's just for like back button, because like he doesn't believe in SWR cache. He thinks they tear. He thinks like the stale will revalidate flickers, distracting it, removes trust. He did a whole thing talking about this, and I actually tend to agree with him. That's why we don't offer like something as much as TanStack. I think there are cases where you want something like TanStack query, but I actually think that it's overkill for the base example, and that's kind of what he's getting at here. Even though he didn't really explain it, he's basically saying that caches aren't that important. User expects to see fresh content when you click. It's why browser waits the page, right? So you're saying when you're navigating forward, you should see fresh content, right? Counterly means faster, but not always better. Blah blah blah. Stale revalidate. He's talking about this. Yeah. So I agree with him. So now with this tangent, it feels tempting to collate you with the data requirement, but we also avoid client-server waterfalls. Well, again, if you were using Solid in this example, you would have avoided client-server waterfalls. They're not always avoidable, though, so his point does have some merit. Client loaders, and yeah, this is a solution. Basically, it doesn't have to be client loaders, but if you hoist the data fetching up, then you can kind of do the stuff at the same point. Now he got rid of that waterfall, right? There's even a better solution, which we'll get to in a minute here. But client loader down to the parts of the data requirements are no longer co-located. Yes, right. The middle ground argument and what is if you use the client loaders to ensure the data, there, like ensure the cache, and then still conceptually fetch in the components. If you're in a model that rarely waterfalls, then like, which is not React here, as we see, which clearly waterfalls. But if you're in a model that rarely waterfalls, you could probably get by for the most part just fetching in the component, and then things that like have actually necessary dependence, kind of hoisting them up to these kind of preloaders. Essentially, that's what solid start architecture is, and what's kind of been like basically sold Tanner on a while ago when it got him into server functions, and that's how TanStack start kind of came about. But yes, I get what he's saying here. He's saying like, you hoist it is the solution, generally speaking, right? That's how the approach is. The data required not co-located. I used to do this actually. Do you know how I used to do the co-location? I used to have my client loader. I used to put .data files on all my components, right? So I would like my client loader essentially would be like the page .data in a separate file. Now in Solid Start we have that export route thing, but then what I would do is inside the client loader import queries from other components and essentially be like, okay, if I have this component on my page, I will also import it. Now don't get me wrong, there's a double wire there because you're both linking it through the component tree and you're linking it through the data loader tree. So there's two trees, but you can definitely co-locate the query pieces by just like doing it. I built, that's how I built web apps around 2015 or 14, 15. Like this is a pattern that we used as we scaled. So it is solvable here. You're recognizing that there's a separate tree. It's like MVM or VM. You're basically creating a secondary tree. That tree being on the server can be even better potentially. And he goes to server loaders. Now I've started loaders that each route is self-contained. So loaders independent of your components. If it runs before any components, you could be part of your API, blah, blah, blah. And he's showing that on the server, like now you don't have to worry about the cascade, but you don't have to worry about the cascade here anyway. So what's the benefit of server load? You don't treat server as a black box when you kill the server is an edge place for your data fetching. Agreed. On the server, you can have all the levels, improve the performance, blah, blah, blah. And then even the inherent files will be cheap. The thing is, there aren't inherent waterfalls if you move the stuff in here, right? We got rid of the waterfall. So the question is, but do you know what we secretly did by merging this all into a single loader? If I want to update one thing here, like this is all tied, so it doesn't help. But let's say I just need the comments. I didn't need to grab the post again. Well, I'm out of luck because essentially it's all a single process. There's no way to break it apart. If I have 10 comments or 10 comments on my page or 10 posts, whatever, there's no way to invalidate one. Now that I moved it to the server, I've lost the ability because I do all my data fetching in a single thing, which he doesn't talk. We don't talk about mutation in this post very much, right? But yes, the process gives all the opportunities for optimization. Yes, optimization for fetching, but not for mutation. Let's continue. For memory request caching, batching, reduce the number of requests further. Yeah, okay. But the truth of the matter is, this doesn't waterfall. So whatever you did in your REST API could provide the exact same optimization here. Yeah, I don't agree. I think this is like assuming too much. Even if you stick to calling the REST server, you've covered a lot of the useful properties potential. Yes. Cut out, you'd have to derail Django. Okay, so upside server loaders. What are the downsides? I don't know. Then he talks about server functions. Yeah. Mentions TanStack. As I said, being in the React ecosystem is good. Get the credit. Right. And he's using React server function again. Okay, I won't do all the difference now. Okay, blah, blah. And then, and he's showing a fetch happening inside the component, but we have co-location, but we didn't actually solve co-location though, because we have the same cascade. So yeah, basically server functions don't actually solve co-location. The benefit of server functions is that it's an RPC, so you control both sides of the communication. So you can have advanced serialization formats. You can pass RSCs. You can pass stream JSON. You can pass whatever the hell you want. We can serialize promises, readable streams. We can serialize anything with server functions because we control both sides. So that is the benefit. So if you're following me so far, we're talking about each of these separately. But if you actually start talking about them in combination and you understand and compare and contrast as you go along instead of looking at them independently, you can be like, okay, if these solve this part of the problem, and client loaders kind of solve the other part of the problem. And server loaders
also solve the same as client loaders, except they actually tie your hands when it comes to mutation. What if you just fed your server functions into your client loader? Could you basically get the same benefit? Could you choose and have granular control over which queries you combine or separate, essentially? And because you have the ability to say stream, if you like, you don't want to block everything. You want to be able to get data as soon as possible. Would you have the ability to say, put these together and stream that content? So you know, if this comes back first, it can respond right away, separate. Like once you combine stuff, it's positive on the network from the perspective of like number of requests, but it's actually, you end up sometimes with like the like as slow as the slowest request problems. It's, you know, streaming solves it back again by letting it be decoupled, but generally just putting requests together is actually slower. You actually want to you know, you need to keep the granularity, like otherwise you're going to be only as slow as your slowest query. So sometimes, you know, it benefits. And we're also hoisting in this example. So if you can hoist and control the server dynamics on both sides, it doesn't solve co-location necessarily, but you can basically combine the benefits of it's the same benefits as server loaders in client loaders at your control. You decide the depth at which you mutate and invalidate versus combine. It's basically dynamic granular server loaders if you combine those two technologies together. Right? The technologies themselves don't solve it, but because these mechanisms like loaders are built into the router, you can do smart things. Like you can be like, oh, I know when I'm returning this data that I also have to do a redirect. Or like when I do this action, I need to do a redirect. And then I know what the next page is. I know which loaders to run. And because I have this RPC format, you know, which you could have in server loaders, they could be a custom format. You can do stuff like stream the data for the next page, single flight mutations. All these capabilities can be built in by putting them together. Now, to be fair, server components on their own don't, or server functions on their own don't do this. Literally, they're just a serialization piece, but they can play part of the bigger thing. We regress in performance characteristics of fetching. Yeah, so don't fetch in the component, still hoist it. But when we collate back, we're a step back from server loaders. Well, not necessarily if you put them in the client loaders. So basically, you can get the best of both worlds at a shifting scale. So they don't enforce but don't prevent client waterfalls. No, but if you combine them with loaders, they do. Server functions reduce calling, but they don't improve data fetching. They change parts. Okay, let's talk about GraphQL, right? I mentioned before that you could have a pattern where your client loaders imported other things. That's basically what GraphQL is. The only difference with GraphQL is that because you have a schema, you can do partials, which is like, God bless. Like I admit, I still ended up hoisting a lot of stuff. Because like it's only the level of the query that I could hoist back into the client loader through import through my data side, where you can literally say, I need these fields. It's more granular because you have a schema, right? That's the biggest benefit of GraphQL, because you can spread it in. Where using the approach I did, you basically have to like at least indicate what you needed at a model level. Now, to be fair, when I was building this back in Bitagami, we had our own solution that was kind of like GraphQL. We had a very powerful query syntax. It wasn't as good as projections. Like this is all about like figuring out what fields and fields and fields, but we could basically query anything. We could make basically full joined SQL queries all from a JSON syntax. And I mean, we could combine simple projections, obviously, like arrays of fields. So like I guess I was working in a GraphQL-esque world here, but like this is one of those things where GraphQL is actually kind of like something I'm talking about, because he mentioned they don't actually fetch. They are actually hoisting. You can consider GraphQL the equivalent of client loaders with a serialized format. So GraphQL is client loaders plus server functions, actually. So in a sense, what TanStack Query has done is reinvent a very rudimentary version of GraphQL. That's a better way of doing it. And I say TanStack, but I'm going to say SolidStart actually, since that's where it came from. He says it's like an auto-generated, but somewhere you actually have to hoist up the actual request. So you have all your fragments, but where do you do the request? Eventually you create the query, and that query, you see, you automatically generated a loader, but generally loader page, like, you understand, like you're essentially, this could be server functions. This is a syntactical difference. Essentially, you still, like, even with fragments, you still have the query, and that query is essentially the server function. So I'd say it's less like a loader, more like a server function. But to be fair, I guess it's loader in the sense that you can put all the data. GraphQL also does it do granular mutation updates? I believe it does. Yeah, so GraphQL deserves to say that it's one of the features that actually could crack the nut. Good. So if you agree that, but without that, the server with or without. Yeah, see, this is my disagreement. I basically think that the modern approach to using server functions with client loaders is like basically GraphQL. It's just less code and simplified because there's no schema. If you like added a schema to it, you would have exactly GraphQL. So at least he acknowledges that this is a solution. So I'm going to assume that he acknowledges what we're doing is a solution. Yeah. If you had an actual waterfall, what he's showing is actually true. But then in that case, what you would do is you'd be like, okay, this is something that depends on itself. Push the whole thing into the server function. You know what I mean? Like, you control the granularity there. But yes, his example would stand out more so. And then he talks about RSCs and showing how you can interlace. Yeah, but the thing is, this has the same characteristics as server loaders. The challenge here is, what if you want to invalidate one comment? You basically have to go back and re-render the whole list. Like, this has been, and what if they're independent parts of the UI? I mean, he admits himself like on the thing that'd be great if we had like more slots, more granular updates, and that's like the app router. The app router, a way of looking at it in Next, is actually server functions that return RSCs, but only at the routing level. But I think the funny thing is, you start stepping back and get a situation that's slightly more complicated. What if the data that you need to update from the mutation impacts multiple levels on the page? It's not a UI constraint. See, the benefit of this approach is that, like, obviously it looks really nice. It integrates nice. You can do sub fetching. The funny thing about this approach, though, is he didn't get rid of the waterfalls. Await. This is a waterfall. It's on the server. It's closer. It's a better waterfall. But if his exact example earlier in this avoidable waterfall case in Solid 2.0 async doesn't even waterfall on the client or the server. So in a sense, if this was a long request, our naive client loader thing would be faster than his RSC version. Obviously, if there's a necessary waterfall, it's a different thing. But I'm just pointing out he has not solved waterfalls in this model. But waterfalls don't impact as much, I suppose. But I'm just kind of putting this out there. So flows, use client. But the more interesting situation is if you have data sparkled hitting different parts of the page. Let's say you're updating a cart that's in the top corner by hitting a buy button. I mean, that one only, and it also updates stuff over here and updates stuff in your sidebar. The RC approach is just re-render the whole page essentially, and then update the places. Now, if you actually wanted to granularly invalidate because you had multiple operations on your page that did impact different parts of the page, there's not a very easy way to model this with RSCs because they tied the data to the UI. So if you have UI depending on different data in that same zone, and you try and render one invalidation, you're going to have to render the other part that depends on different data, which means you're gonna have to fetch again, which is why there's so much reliance on caches in on the server in RSC model. Not because you need it like for typical performance, like like you need Redis because you hit this thing often, because literally every re-render or update is going to cause you to have to fetch from all your data sources because you've jammed everything together. So like in a sense, I mean, this is beautiful from composition. He hasn't got rid of the waterfalls, which irks me a little bit, but at least like this is on the server, you can see the UI that attaches to it. But once you move from the simple case and that UI is now distributed in the data, you have to hoist the data loading in the RSCs. If you think about it, like because the only way to get this data or this data somewhere outside of this section of the tree, it's like put it in context, right? It's the same equivalence to something like context. So like now you're hoisting the data loading, which means you're blocking higher up in the tree, right? And how do you make it, like, how do you make that granular? I mean, at least if you hoist it, there is a theoretical zone where you could make multiple separate trees interweave in a semi-granular way by like children through children projections. And if you hoist it high enough to the highest data source, you can actually make this dance. But my guess is the majority of React developers are just going to accept that the waterfall exists and call it a day. It's on the server. It's better than the client. I mean, that's good. But that's what we're missing here in the story. So we get the efficiency of server loaders, but also the downsides. We get the co-location. That's true. We get a vanilla mental model of there's no separate API. Yes, but at the distractingness that we lose that ability to inject context and invalidate things granularly. So what? As far as RC different patching data in a single round trip seems like a bad idea if part is slow to load. RC solves this by streaming, GraphQL by defer, server functions also by streaming. Client server all seem like that's probably if you're prefetching. That's not true for inherent, like for unavoidable ones. Yes, prefetching doesn't help. What helps is grouping things together. Server functions let you group them the same way server loaders do in certain things. Fetching in components might seem like a bad idea due to server only waterfalls. Yes, this is true. Okay, I think we covered this one. Function stays. Yeah, I mean, and this is what I said to Dan essentially in our conversation here, because I was like, bottom line, unavoidable waterfalls are unavoidable, but should be moved to the server, like we've been doing since the dawn of the web. Co-location is an ergonomic question. Do you stream data in GraphQL server functions or components like in RSCs? RSCs offer nicer ergonomics for fetching, definitely. But it isn't why people have issues with them or even push back against remix loaders. It was because of data mutation and validation. Sometimes replacing the whole page isn't good enough. I know it worked for re-rendering components in React, but now there's a network in between. So this is good. No, I think because what Dan's talking about here in these articles finally is the stuff that I was talking about on my stream like 2 years ago. So he's finally like gone it to a point where we can actually have these conversations, because I think as he walks through these mental models, he's like, okay, I like this. This is what sells. He sees the good points. Now we can actually address why people push back. And maybe that will help RSCs find the solution that they're looking for to actually solve these kind of problems. Because right now we're at that point where like we're just talking about the good stuff, right? You got to go to the next step and go, okay, well, what's the impact on this, you know, when you put in the big picture? And because I went through this ourselves. You guys on stream joined me when we went through this process, because I was very pro server components and islands for almost 2 years when I was working on Solid Start, figuring out models I could do it. And to be fair, I still think there is some potentials here, but you have to look at that. The final thing that got me was the mutation story was not as good as GraphQL. And with server functions, I could approximate GraphQL fairly easily. And it was dynamic and it was scalable. And it basically had all the control qualities that I liked, because like, you know, me personally, I just couldn't resolve to just like blow it out. I know that's the React philosophy, but fundamentally, that will never be the best way to do things. All right. Okay, cool. Last topic today. Let's talk Remix. I got maybe about half an hour left, so let's talk about the Remix stuff. And to do that, I actually, give me a second. I want to, no, not this. I want to see if I can find the original place that I found out about the Remix thing. Yeah. So there was a Reddit post that someone, if you guys want to know how the whole leak happened, let me see if I can find more, but let me go back here. There was yeah, there was this Reddit post, Declaration of Independence, where someone found this commit that wasn't supposed to go up May 20th, 2025. And it's since been removed. But some people saw it before it got deleted and actually copied it. And it caused a big stir because people were like, what the hell's going on? With Remix. The contents of that post that were removed are here. Someone basically forked it and got to it, the non-deleted person. React was a hero the web needed. Let's look at this original post. After this, the iPhone and Facebook uses jump, blah blah blah, encapsulated components, all this stuff. React's popular thing. Fast forward a decade, React is the lead landscape. React server components, server functions, post reason React Router now supports them. But as much as we've been greatly jumping on the React train, we are indebted to everyone part of. We hope countries equally appreciate. Wake Up Remix conference, blah blah blah. It didn't feel like the React we loved anymore. Basically, they've been working on RSCs for a while, and it just wasn't what they were looking for. Simplicity, stability, and style. Complex the last few years, RSCs. The funniest thing is, I'll hold my reservation here. Bundler first development. Bundlers aren't terrible. How React's reliance on blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, the RSC story has been very hard from a bundler stance. You talk to Tanner, Nikhil made the first RSCs in Beat like 2 years ago, and we're like still haven't got there now. I mean, to be fair, he hacked it, the way Nikhil does, and it wasn't the perfect solution. But it shows that like how big of a move it is to kind of make this a general purpose thing when you can't take the most popular bundlers and like get it in there, over a 2-year period, even with an open PR. Like, I'm not saying that as a slight against React. I mean, generally speaking, this is a complicated process. Some things are better directly in React, others are worse. Of course, complexity size, React has 3 modes, for heaven's sake. You're not immune, blah, blah, blah. Starting to build what React did when we first found it. See, this is a lot of echoes of what I was talking about earlier about feeling React's loss of direction, inspiration, like all these things. That's why Remix is moving on from React, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, they wrote a better blog post about this later. But what I got from this thing is, what practice model driven, built on the web APIs, be religiously runtime, avoid dependency, demand compensacy. I'm like, they sound like they want to build everything themselves, right? And they don't really want to deal with stuff like even TypeScript or bundlers if they can avoid it. I mean, I get it. Honestly, the web used to have way less ceremony. As I'm about the same age as Ryan Florence. We grew up on a time with .NET, ASP, and then like Rails and stuff. And you went through all this crap. And then when you went back to JavaScript, like in 2010, it was like, man, this is freeing. I never want to freaking touch a compiler or types or any of that ever again. Like, and we learned how to develop well in that environment. Obviously, complexity has increased, and these extra tools actually help now, and people won't be caught dead without them. But for the first, or for that wave of JavaScript, the one that brought us JavaScript frameworks, people were kind of done with like smart IDEs, types, all the kind of stuff, that have kind of sneaked back into language. They were done with the complexity. That's why we went to SPAs. Back end was complex. Now front end is complex. Anyway, let me switch over StreamYard again. Try to do no bundle on React. And Dino and Fresh have been doing that for years. Well, yeah, I mean, no, but I think they're saying even more so because no bundle and Dino is kind of like a lie. Like it's no bundle because Dino handles it for you. Like when I read this, I was like, okay, so these guys are going to try and make something like Astro. Actually, you know what? Let me see if I can get my May 20 predictions. Let me see. May 21st. What did I say? I don't know how much I shouldn't bring mine and Tanner's private conversation on here, but I basically said that they were going to make something like Astro, and that I thought they were going to fork React. Let me see if I can find it. And yeah. Nah, I it's too embedded in the conversation. Anyway, but you could see from this that they're leaving React, but these guys do not particularly like Signals or like Solid's approach. So I mean, I think it was pretty clear. So, oh, really? He said at JSX is fair game. Well, then anyone who says that's a hypocrite, because even React's own JSX transform has changed over the years. Like that's BS. If you think I wrote something on the lines that they were going to do something that's like Preact, but probably use like HTM, like tag template literals. If they're using JSX, I'm sorry, you guys are bullshit. I mean, it's yeah, okay. Let me see if I can grab this off Twitch. It's so funny. I'm like, am I behind the chat? You shared the link on Twitch, but like I don't actually see it on Twitch. It's so funny. Whatever. That's actually really annoying. I actually don't see this comment on Twitch right now. Try sending it again. Okay, there it is. Weird. Like they both came out at the same time. Yeah. Run my code through SPL before publish. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's been hints here that they've been basically building an island thing. Okay, so let's go to the actual announcement now. Okay. To be fair, I think their main reason for getting rid of Preact is they don't want to support. They want to actually trim more stuff. Like they don't want to support class components and stuff. Ironically, that's actually Preact's most efficient way. Preact with class components is faster than Preact with hooks and faster than Preact with signals. But that's the one they want to cut, of course. Let's see if I can find some tweets on that. But let's go to the actual announcement, which I have somewhere here. Let's look at my bookmarks. Yeah. Summary announcement, it's going to take a nap. V2 came out, then wrapper, blah, blah. We finished working, blah, blah, blah. Ton of weight. React router is really good. Yeah. RSC support, blah, blah, blah. Battle tested. Great. Over the past few years, the web platform has become remarkable progress, and so have the tools we use to build them. As much as we gain, we've also seen complexity grow. Agree. At times, modern web development can feel more like navigating a tool chain than building the web. Real idea is too disruptive to pursue the past, but Remix no longer tied to a specific paradigm. V3 is a reimagination. Foundations, polarity, blah, blah, blah. It's a modular thing. Time. It's a new version, it's a direction, and one that's faster, simpler, close to the web, blah, blah, blah. What we own the full stack. Okay. No critical dependence, not even on React. Starting with a fork of Preact, a mature virtual DOM library already used heavily at Shopify, Google, and things. Yeah. If you ever wish to develop experience that feels lighter, faster, yeah. Model first development, build on web APIs, as most modern frameworks religiously runtime. The rest of TypeScript or JSX are permissible. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, void dependencies, demand composition. Sure, killing Java. That's okay, cool. Yeah, look, yeah. Either fight for being the fastest framework or do AI AP things. You can't do both. You can't do both. Well, Jack, you understand the AI thing to me because better than I do. Because when I was like looking at this, I was like, what the hell do they mean model first? Like when I think of AI, I think about language. And for me, from a design perspective, this is why I like things like signals and whatnot, just because I think that we'll get to a point where the language is actually much more describable and powerful, and then we can give more power. I don't know enough about how AI works, whether AI should be given that power. But when I was like looking through my bookmarks and I was like trying to find stuff, and like, and he people are like, oh, how do you build for LLMs first? Like, how do you make it AI first? How do you do it for your website? Do you have a sitemap that you understand? Do you have detailed descriptions you can read? Blah, blah, blah. I don't have answers for a lot of this, but some stuff we're just thinking about. Yeah. Like what I read from this, maybe the wrong thing, is like they actually have no clue either. I like this is at this point marketing hype. Like I'm not. I don't quite understand how this is just not like a tertiary thing. Like I'm not sure what AI has to do with building to be performant or efficient. I tweeted that number one is basically making sure. Yeah, let me see. Do I have one of your tweets? I actually saw something that you tweeted. The most compelling part to me is model first bullet point. We don't have a framework that truly first class or AI. So every AI app ends up being a lame ass chatbot. I don't even think the model first would look like. I'm just spitballing. Imagine the app for business owners could take all the information about the business and give it the prompt and voice, blah, 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 scoring analytics and things, custom dashboard, creating alerts, notifying what opportunities arise. Okay. Step back in the application into vertical. Okay. Then back in Astro, and it just happens. We're starting to see a little glimmer here. Okay. Some cool framework supporting for streaming, some cool demos around AI-driven mutable AI. It's all pegs on the edges. So model first really calling part, although tough not to crack. If we can get it worked out and build the next generation app with customers' unique values and current customer can't provide, text shoestring billing. Maybe I'm just reading too much of model first bullet. Talking about it here. I've been talking about folks a lot. The response feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Yeah, I think I just lack knowledge in this area to even know what this means. Like I get the beginning here when you're talking about what AI looks like for the app, but when I'm thinking about frameworks, I'm mostly thinking about mechanics, like characteristics, right? And a lot of those characteristics involve partials, like streaming or partial updates. One of the things I thought was really kind of interesting was we have a repeat control flow in Solid 2.0, which basically is like a chat in a control flow essentially, because it is super performant way to do appending lists, right, without diffing the whole thing. And I start thinking about like challenges people have generating markdown, and the fact that like the web browser self heals but markdown doesn't. So you have like this thing where you have to almost like complete the end as it comes and then replace it in parts and do that. No one handles those kind of things powerfully. So like when I think about AI, I think about mechanisms around transfer and updates and granularity. And funny enough, a lot of it actually aligns with the stuff I've been working on for local first. But I don't know what that means when like when someone's like talking about like AI first, like when they talk about like I'm making an AI first framework, like I don't even have the foggiest idea what that means. If it's just if CLI generate me a blog, then it's like okay, so it's like tool assisting. It's not actually about okay. Yeah, I guess let's stop on the AI. Let's talk about Preact. Yeah, I think that the biggest benefit here is the compat. That being said, it's interesting because it's like React has a wider range of stuff. Like if you took React and removed the class components, then you're also attacking compat a bit. You're not going to get compat on like suspense and any of the async features, which is fine. They don't want those. So I do wonder if there was a time period where this compat argument would have been more compelling, but now we've like been slowly moving for it. Maybe people are just locked in time, which is kind of my concern with the Preact thing. At first, like on one side, I'm like very excited about this announcement and what it means for like the whole ecosystem in general. As I said, I knew they were going to choose Preact. I mean, their motivations aren't about like performance or about like thinking, okay, if I could choose the best tool moving forward in it, like that's not their motivation. This is just a cog in the wheel that ensures that they can own the whole thing and that they have maybe a possible easy migration story, right? Like this isn't like spit on the wall, how would the best thing possible work? But it's like it's very interesting because the compat stuff, well, easy isn't also like 100%. You are moving off React. There are details. It's the kind of details that aren't going to catch you right away. They're the kind of details like that you generate the code and then you realize that it actually just doesn't work the way that you think it works. Like it compiles, but it doesn't actually work the same, and it might not actually matter, but it might. So like I think it's interesting because even if they went directly with Preact, you could see like a kind of a hype push there, but they want to fork Preact. Well, and again, the reason you pick Preact as a fork is because it's very established. Like there's a lot of virtual DOM libraries. It's a good choice. You know what I mean? Like you can just be like if you just want it nuts and bolts, it's small, it's relatively fast. It's not one of the faster ones, but it's like decent. And it's hard to say actually. These days, React and Preact are actually fairly similar in performance. People don't realize that they all like. So actually, I don't even want to say it's necessarily performant. It's small, basically. It's so like it makes sense from that perspective, especially as like you know familiar for React devs and doing all that stuff. I don't think this is going to be the focus of their thing. You know what I mean? Like they want to build the islands, which means the Preact part actually gets kind of smaller. But you could go going, well, why aren't they just doing Dino and Fresh, right? Maybe because of Dino, right? Like there's a lot of overlap here. I think there's two things that I want to say about this whole thing. One thing is, if you haven't worked outside the React ecosystem in the last decade, you have no clue how hard it is to work outside the React ecosystem. I think they're in for a very rude awakening because like there's different pools. As I mentioned before, like there's the people inside React and they're kind of safeguarded by the React blessed vision, and they can do stuff and you release libraries and have great success and do stuff. And then there's people outside of React trying to kind of scramble and like show that other things are viable. And the problem is those two places can exist at the same time. You can basically have people go, yeah, we know that there's way better solutions than React out there. And at the same time be like, but I'm using React forever. Like you can compartmentalize that and separate it. The challenge is when you walk between those lines, getting to the pinnacle on either side is a tough challenge. You don't just go from being like, oh yeah, I'm using React forever, and then going, oh, something outside of React. Like there's already solutions in that space that you're going to have to like push through. Do you know what I mean? Now, if what you're building is truly novel, that's interesting. If you actually are changing the game, that's interesting. But it's still a tricky challenge because that whole portion that's like, I'm using React forever, doesn't care if you're a game changer, not even remotely. You can literally upended the whole thing completely, got every other solution out there to acknowledge that your way is the best and change their stuff to be your way. That portion, which is the vast majority of people, are not going to be impressed. So that's like the best thing you can hope for. And like I think this is going to be very interesting for them because it's incredibly hostile. This is a world that I've been living in the last decade. When you go on Twitter and see people talking about, there's like all these like little comments all over the place. They're like, "Oh, why didn't you choose Solid? Why did you choose Solid?" They're not going to choose Solid. They weren't going to because it's not to their preference. But they now have to explain why they don't. See, when they're in React, no one cares. But now that you're not on React, you actually have to explain why you didn't do that. And yeah, I don't know. You guys are in my arena now, as far as I'm concerned, right? Like this is a place where different values exist, and I'm interested to see how that goes for them. Everyone here has changed the game some way, but within the constraints of React, yeah. This is what you saw what your local first, yeah. Once you move out of React, the guardrails are gone, and you got to be a freaking pit fighter. And I don't mean in the like just being aggressive. 100% window God's tracking one for no, nothing would. That, but it's fine. We need to move on. Like, which brings me to the second point. I think it's great. This is huge. React's been 3 tiers. React's been essentially Next.js, Remix, and then client spa people that don't know how to move to the other stuff. Remix was the smallest portion, but I remember I did that poll when I was asking people, like what their favorite pattern was, loaders, this spa, blah, blah, and it was almost initially even down the line. There's basically been 3 camps, 3 models in React. I don't want to go back to this. It was a few streams ago, but like there's been 3 camps. And what happened is Tanner started owning the spa camp, right? And then the Remix guys are like, oh crap, we should own it because we own React Router, which is the biggest thing. So they started pulling back on that to kind of beefing up the Remix side, right? But ultimately, what you have is 3 Reacts. And there's the next React, which deep into RSCs is floundering a bit. I mean, I think it's the good things, but they're still figuring stuff out. Dan Abramoff posts, we've been talking about this. This has been like a hard time. It's a challenge. It's a new version. It's a new thing. It is a distinct React. People have to do it. There's the Remix side, which, yes, those React router types that Remix is kind of pulling in are now kind of, they're still there, but now they're presumably going to try and fracture that. So a bunch of them are probably going to float back into Tanner's zone, right? And they're going to go on their new path, which it's going to be a much more difficult path, right? I mean, showing that they chose Preact obviously is a very big announcement, and it's good for Preact, and it'll get good attention out there for the framework. But if you step back on the other hand, I mean, Dino and Fresh has been progressing stuff around a bit, on the island side, but like for the most part, from the Mindshift side, Preact just hasn't been as much a part of the conversation. I mean, they added signals, but even whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so like this is a very difficult road. And then basically we have TanStack, which is basically taking over the spa people and probably getting stragglers who kind of have issues on the like Remix side or the React Router 7 side. So like this is like taking a big ice pick and just just cracking right down the core of React. Like the ripples of that have a bigger impact than anything else going here. And it's very interesting because it's exciting. Like this is like, whether or not the new Remix is anything worth talking about, it doesn't matter. The damage is done. Like, as I said, it's going to be very hard for whatever they do to matter because of just like how hard that road is. But that's not the important part. The important part is some of the biggest proponents of React are like, look, we can do better. And it's an interesting thing because they have their road on this side with Preact. TanStack, Solid is the second citizen. You have React and Solid and other stuff, but generally speaking, Solid is the second citizen there, which is like, so there is a there is a offload mechanism there. So you might be like, okay, I like the remix guy stuff, and you might go, okay, I'm gonna follow those guys because I trust Ryan Florence and Michael Jackson and whatnot, and go that direction. Some people might just follow on that. Tanner's side is keep on building stuff you know. But here, if you don't want to go to Next.js and you are looking for some new, look, there's also the solid thing. That's a much harder path, like the Preact path. Like no one is going to, award you for not using React. But what we're seeing here is that big members of the community are either pushing new things that are off React or giving people escape ramps off of it. And that impact is, I mean, I don't know how to put it. This is the biggest shakeup in ages. People might be like, oh, whatever, no one cares about this new remixing. We'll just keep on using React or 7 or 10 stack or whatever, and this doesn't affect it. I said those are like the 80%. Those people you're not going to sway anyways. But how many more of these things are going to happen before one more person tries to check it out, or one more person does it out, one more maintainer, or one more thing, and one more thing? The snowball has to start getting rolling. And that's how I look at these days. I didn't even have to do anything to do this. Like, this is becoming an inevitability. I mean, we don't know. Prediction remix my internal. Yeah, I mean, he felt that Jason always does that. It bugs me a little bit sometimes because if you look at Jason, history on like Twitter and stuff, he doesn't spend a ton of time on there, but he'll make some big claim of some future thing he's working on, and then you'll usually never see it, and then he disappears for 2 years, and he comes back and he does it again, and then he does it again, and then he does it again. And I haven't been on Twitter that long, maybe 5 years, but I've seen this happen 3 times, and like I kind of want to know what he's building, or if this is just like a hype machine trick that he does. Because like for me, I have a hard time with that. Like if I have something big, I make a demo. I never show something without at least a prototype. Usually I've already shipped the thing by the time I can talk about it, because I want to be damn sure that it's a thing. I just can't get in that mindset where I start hyping people on nothing. It might be different this time. So yeah, I mean, it's a good way to kind of keep the conversation going. Definitely. So like I think Preact makes a lot of sense for Shopify too on the side thing. Preact with islands is like the perfect solution for Shopify. I was surprised they didn't go in Dino. I was surprised they invested in Remix. Like all these things are true facts. Don't get me wrong. Like it's interesting. There are 2 Reacts, Java, Dan's. Anyway. Yeah, Kent's going all AI and that's good. Like if you got people working on the AI stuff, I think there's gonna be a lot of really interesting innovations on this. I think it's one of those things that's hard to hype on until you actually have something. And I, as always, live very firmly in reality, so I can't really worry about that just yet. If not React is the message, that's fair. But if moving beyond React, why Preact? Curious to see convincing enough. Yeah, they're gonna have a really hard time, honestly. Hey, think about it. Svelte, Vue, Solid, basically the whole other ecosystem has basically spent a huge amount of time, and especially with the convergence on Solid recently, like where Vue Vapor and Svelte, basically convincing everyone who's like, even people in the React ecosystem, like, look, if there's a better choice, this is the direction you're going to go. People are not saying that about Preact. I mean, maybe a few people. I think there's that guy in chat who seems very pro Preact who keeps on coming in, so I can't remember your name at the moment. I'll see him. But like, generally speaking, we have won the mind share of the non-React crowd and the React crowd in the context of non-React. So going to Preact is crazy, like from that perspective. But it also doesn't matter because they literally don't care about that. So they're going to get pushed back, but only in the places where people care about mind share. The general population has no clue about anything. They don't know how anything works. So it doesn't matter. Like the only place they're going to get pushed back is on Twitter and Reddit and Hacker News and all those places. People will be just like, what the hell are you guys doing? But you step out away from that bubble, no one will care. They'll be like, oh, Preact seems like cool. It's like React, but smaller, We sold more hoodies than you. Yeah, they definitely sold more hoodies than SolidJS. I wonder if they sold more hoodies than Mr. Solid, my punk rock band. It's really is 100 for the vapor cycle. I mean, that's what it takes to get started, right? You have an idea, get the idea, get the money, and you start going with it. I mean, the guys are capable of delivering, so their track record gives people reason to invest in them. And I think this will be interesting. I think the implications are very interesting. I think this is a very exciting time. I can't get Solid 2.0 out fast enough because seriously, like this is like watching like a big like a glacier or something floating by, and you start seeing the cracks, and you know that the things are going to drop off. The majority of the glacier is going to stay there, right? But like people are going to really be running and capture stuff, and whenever that kind of fracturing happens around React, on this tone, I like being there because like stuff like Solid's close enough to React on an old React on philosophy that I think there's a really good alignment there. Where sometimes jumping into other stuff is a lot harder. What if React team didn't keep up with everything that happened last year? Then everything makes sense. It's all about React versus Preact. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It feels like I entered a time machine and went back 10 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely easier to fork. They basically, when I was saying to him, I said they do something to tenor. I was like, it's going to be Preact like. It's probably like could be even SnapDOM. Like that's one of the BDOM libraries that like. I don't know. Do we have hoodies at our store? Store.solidjs.com. Then maybe it's merch.solidjs.com. What it was? It's funny. Like, it is a little hidden about store. No, /store. No, we don't have hoodies, but you can get this very stylish Got Signals shirt. No, we don't have hoodies. What do you know? Oh, it also comes in white. Why pre-announce a horror? They want to own it, which is that's the craziest part, and it's exactly what I expected from them too. They might back off this thing, but this is part of their thing. Like they're so frustrated with like this is their shot at making a framework. The funny thing is owning all the parts is hard. Like I mean, I watched Quick. They had a good story too with Builder.io and all that stuff, and amazing technology, actually impactful technology. Man, they're in for a ride. They have no idea. But like if they like somehow start finding success here and like actually like do some novel stuff, like the impact of this is so huge. Like I am very excited for them. I don't want to come off as too pessimistic here, but like because like the potential what it would mean is so huge. But I mean, I have to keep myself, practical. I mean, Tanner already would. He basically, because of Nozzle, the 2.0 has been kind of the thing a lot of people have been waiting for because of some of the changes, stabilization. The truth of the matter is 1.0 has been stable for 7 years, but it's always hard when you have the next major version looming. People just want that opportune time. I think there's going to be a huge push around Solid when 2.0 comes out, especially because of like how powerful the async model is, all the features, the stuff we've been talking about. Like, this is a lot of stuff that I've been waiting to do for years. Like 1.0 did only come out 4 years ago, which is a long time. But for me, I've been on that path, like very little change between version 0 and version 1 after 2019. So for me, this has been like a 6-year journey to get to 2.0. And after that, it'll be able to be quicker. We'll better organize. I learned a lot structurally and stuff, just things that are hard to kind of get back into 1.0. I think that might be our moment. They probably want to hack suspense and transitions. Yeah, I mean, it's completely doable. Well, yeah, TanStack will never make a single framework bet. Yeah, it's less about TanStack. It's the interesting is Tanner. Do you know what I mean? TanStack itself will continue to be agnostic. You continue to build great tools for developers thing. But where does Tanner sit? Tanner is still in React camp. I have him like right on the verge. He just needs another push. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. So it's bundle size. I get this. Yeah, they award people in that. I was down on that for a while, and a lot of stuff like with Solid was like about bundle size, but I'm definitely not as strict as them. I do measure it every time. I refactor stuff. I refactor people's PRs because of size, but I will always choose performance over size. I'm no Preact's position is size over performance. But yeah, they have tools in the repos to actually check for it. It makes it very hard to contribute, which I get. I think that this is actually very justified looking at it. What was it, Goober, who's also from the Preact guys? Incredibly small style JS solution, similar kind of thing. They were actually did a competition where like if you could like knock, bytes off, you could get $1,000 or something. Anyway, let's see what do we got going on here. Sorry, just my phone call. I'll probably have to deal with that in a bit. 25% of deployed React apps use query, which means that 25% of React apps developers who use dev tools use Solid in some form, which is pretty cool. Anyway, it's crazy to see how crazy we're sticking the router. People would switch routers, but continue to use TanStack query. It's a great pattern. The resource API originally made from Solid was very influenced by query. I knew I didn't need the same key value thing, but it fit the shape so well, and I just was like, this is exactly the right kind of approach. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that dedication to size is incredible. I know that like since Solid 1.0, Solid's probably gone up like a kilobyte. It's hard to tell because a lot of these features are tree shakeable, probably slightly less, like half a kilobyte, but still like Preact is like dead stop. That being said, a lot of the types of features Preact added hasn't been as impactful. So I do expect when the next stuff comes around, like whatever Jason's working on, maybe we might see more significant impact. But even the way they structure everything, like keep the hooks package separate, all these things like isolated, it lets you get the smallest possible thing, which is really, really cool. Anyway, I think I don't know if I have anything else to add on this whole thing. I think it's definitely really interesting. I want to look at my bookmarks really quickly to see if I had any related things. Oh yeah, the bundling question. Bold move, but I'm curious and honest first thoughts. Will there be bundling for protection at all? Bundle protection of HMarker and dev? For me, we're going to do all runtime for simplicity, no bundler in dev, like none in prod either. Thanks, native. Can CDNs do tree shaking? If so, that's cool. Otherwise, this is crazy. I think this. Yeah, you should probably bundle production builds, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah. I see the impulse here. I think this is interesting. I mean, someone has to do it to prove whether this is viable or not. I think we already know the answer, but again, like just go. I'm excited. Oh man, you know what I mean? Sorry, is there any? Okay, yeah. So this is the leak. RSCs released. Like the timing is not coincidental. They dragged their feet on RSCs because like I don't think. I mean, I even wonder if that was intentional. For maybe they didn't like the solution in general. The other reason they might have done it is because the second that Remix gets RSCs or Tanstack gets RSCs, it like validates the approach. The longer everyone holds out on implementing RSCs outside of Next, it makes Next look bad. It's true. Like you know, I remember like talking to Fred Astro, like they could get RSC reports, and it's like, yeah, we could, but it's like, or we don't, and basically people like leave it up to Next and the React team to educate. You know what I mean? Like the longer they drag on this, the more fractured it gets. It actually opens the way for this V3 remix thing. But see, what they did here is they're like, oh yeah, if, here's a thing that we don't care about delivered. Now we can move on. Like I said, first time I saw it, I'm like, this is a solution you make when you don't care about RSCs. I said it on stream. I'm still standing by that now, and I think that like this is all. I think this is all part of that fracturing. Like it's very interesting. Infinite our season got nothing. Redwood did, huh? For a day, I was like, we're just finding the shifters. They're going for it. Then a day later, oh, they hated React and never wanted to touch it. Yeah, no, I mean this. This is such a. It's. I mean, they're never going to say that because they care about React Router. They do all this stuff. Like this is their product. You can continue using it. This is their thing. But like, the timing is so funny from that perspective. Yeah, which is why I had to keep on working with and convincing them that maybe that's not the right way. I think Tanner actually, like, he's in a place where he's like Remix. He's like, man, I don't even want RSCs. I just want something that does what RSCs does. He almost was like looking at like implementing something very similar to like the island solution that we did in Solid Start. With HTML based thing in Tanstack, and just be like, screw RFCs, but here you can have that capability. And it's like, or how do you do this with like, you guys were on my stream where we kind of talked about how we could do lakes. That was for Tanner. I was doing like a mental map so I could kind of like be like, okay, Tanner, this is how you could accomplish it if you implemented it yourself, and this is how we could get the same capability and or even more powerful than what they do in Remix. So yeah, we definitely paying attention to it. It's just, yeah, yeah. Didn't realize this was live. Two frameworks, Remix for crazy stuff, RS for normal stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to keep on going, but as I said, the timing and the split and stuff, it feels like the end of this like dragging thing. Man, RCs have had a really hard time. As I said, it's really hard to get ground on new architectures, new approaches in this day and age. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the lines here. So I don't know. I'm here for it. There's a lot of. I love when there's chaos and change. It makes things interesting. It means new things are coming. That's the most exciting part about this stuff. So, yeah, I think, yeah, like the hints have been going on. Sometimes I wonder if there's only really two front ends. No front end, no JavaScript, just HTML, not even HTMX. 100% front end rendering background. Like I'm just like looking through all these tweets that I marked, and it's just like, even before they made the announcement, I'm like, something's going on with the Remix guys. I mean, I definitely felt this, right? Definitely. It's. Oh, sorry, no, I wanted to go to my profile. Sorry, one sec. Anyway, I think, yeah, we should give Dev a shout out for his article series on doing events fine grained. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can. Sorry, where's the link? Yeah, he does it the smart way. He puts a link in the second tweet because then Twitter posts it. Good checkout. Also check out his talk, where he explains how Solid eliminates waterfalls. Where is this? Here it is. Yeah. The example at the end is very cool. So yeah, here. No, I'm moving to Portland, Oregon. I'm gonna go live near Jack Harrington and Jason Lindstrom. It seems where all the cool content creators go. Sorry, where? And switch to solid. It's nice. What I want to, sorry, I just want to go to solid profile. Make sure I didn't miss anything. We talked about that, talked about that, talked about that, talked about that. Yeah, no. Better create, yeah. Yeah. I think we're good. I think we're done. I think I have to start packing. But I think things are good. So I'm moving Oregon. Beautiful state, yeah. The part of the cool kids. I don't really drink beer, which is probably a big no-no. Yeah, no. Tanner's and TanStack has been a really good. As I said, Tanner believes in solids, so good stuff keeps on coming our way because of that. All right. Anyways, is anyone streaming right now? I don't even follow enough streamers to know. Oh, good. I think I'm going to call a stream. And until next time, which will be a while, maybe end of June. It's going to be at least 3 weeks till I do another stream. So you guys will just have to contend with what you got now. But until then, everyone have a good one. Catch you later. Bye.